Thank you. So I'd like you to imagine, and I'm adapting a meditation and exercise. Some of you have read books by Kristen Neff. She's written books on self-compassion. Perhaps Christopher Germer. And some of these exercises, I want to adapt some of them, which is very helpful. So I'd just like us to explore right now as you're seated, as you're sitting here, your eyes closed. Imagine you're seated right now on a park bench, a beautiful day. A friend is seated next to you, a dear friend who is struggling. Just try to imagine both of you on the bench. They really need to talk to you. And you're seated there and they are explaining what's going on for them and how they're struggling. Just imagine this scenario for a moment. And notice how you respond to your friend. Notice the words you use, how well you listen to them. Notice the tone of your voice. Do you make any physical gestures to them? Just notice your response to your friend. And just slowly finish up the conversation and allow your friend to then disappear back into the space from which they came, leaving you seated on the bench. Now here you are on the bench, and I'd like you to imagine that you are right now struggling. There are times in our life we've struggled really badly. So not to make you uncomfortable, but place yourself for a moment in that situation, seated there on the bench. And I'd like you to notice your internal dialogue. What do you say to yourself? What's the tone of voice you use? Do you make any physical gestures to yourself? What are they like? Are you hearing yourself well to be able to fully analyze what's happening? So please relax. And slowly, right now, you can open your eyes. So I'd like to ask you now, any differences in how you were dealing with your friend versus how you were dealing with yourself? Sharon?
Yes, one of the things I noticed was touch. So, wanting to, I would touch that person, whether it's put an arm around them or like a hand on their knee. But for myself, there's no touching, thinking about it now would be good to like touch my heart or something. But in those moments, I find I don't do that soothing so much, the physical soothing.
Yes, thank you. Because the physical soothing can come in many ways as well. I mean, sometimes we just need it here. We need a hand on the heart, right? But do we do kind things for ourselves as well when we're struggling? And do we have a habit of doing them in everyday life in a normal, balanced way? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. What else? Were some of you the same? You treat yourself the same as you treat your friend? Arunas? Oh no, Deki Lee, sorry. It's so good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very much like Sharon, a lot of physical touch, which just seems to be so important. For myself, it was simply awareness. So it was more awareness of how difficult things were versus any kind of soothing type of gesture.
So awareness of how both you were struggling and your friend was struggling in different ways.
I'd have to say I'd had more awareness of my own struggle. So in my inability to climb into that other person's shoes specifically, then the touch seemed to be the compassionate way to just say, I'm hearing you.
Right. And would you say the way you treated yourself, the way you treat your friends, somewhat similar?
Nope. No. No, I would say none of the self-soothing, only just awareness for myself, which is, yeah, got it. And no wonder, but not a whole lot of soothing.
Okay. What's the tone of voice, did you notice? Do you have any different tone of voice with your friend versus yourself? Anybody?
I noticed that a lot. I found I was saying mean stuff to myself, sort of similar to like a toxic masculinity football coach that I would never, ever say to an actual friend of mine, thinking about how I could cause them emotional injury. But somehow in my self-talk, there's no concern about how nasty or mean or, get your blank together is very much what is in my mind. And that's really intriguing to think about. I would never say that to a friend, ever. And I'm very quick to yell at myself.
Thank you, Ross. How many people are in that boat? Notice that. Wow, a lot of people. Wow. So first of all, you're not alone, but it's so common. And what happens is we really haven't been able to notice that and use it. It's incredible. And then what do we do with that? Like now that we notice that. So, one level is you notice the differences. Start to notice those differences. I found this really helpful. And I was using a meditation like this before, and then also saw some of the compassion books have similar things. Basically treating yourself like a good friend. Treating yourself like a good friend. What about that idea for a change, for like a breath of fresh air? Now, the other thing is, please know it won't happen right away because the training is I'm not doing it. So this is, again, meditation, spiritual practice is training the mind. You're exercising the mind. Some of you regularly physically exercise, I'm sure. And you know what it's like. And when you skip it for a while, you have to come back slowly and you feel the muscles are sore. And it's the same thing with our mind, not the brain. The mind is separate in Tibetan Buddhism. Your mind, your consciousness is separate, a non-physical entity. How do I exercise that? It's not physical. We can certainly train ourselves with certain behavioral modifications and reminders. That's what the spiritual path is all about. That's what it's all about. Most of you know that. But so how do we slowly do it? So the beginning is you might need to do this meditation a few times, this exercise, and model how you treat your friend. Look how soft the tone, how willing you're to put your arm around them, comfort them, and using, really listening to them and being there for them. And then it's us, not even a kind physical gesture, not even a hand on my heart. Slowly. So then I'm going to think, okay, can I just bring that tone of voice down a little bit that I'm using for myself? Can I maybe, and this is different for everyone, can I get the expletives out of it, of what I'm layering on myself? What happens when you just put the hand on the heart for a moment? We're going to do that in a minute a little later, we're going to do another exercise, right? I love Kristen Neff's giving yourself a self-compassion break, right? Do any of us do that? And some of it has just the hand on the heart, can be just that, start to be a trigger for you, a good trigger, meaning, oh, whoa, really taking myself down right now. Like, why am I being so nasty to myself? You know why? It's just a habit. It's just a habit. So when I have that voice, which it's much quieter now, of the negative stuff on myself, it's rarely, not so much anymore, is I watch it more quickly. If I put my hand here, it's automatically of like, okay, let's just bring that down a couple notches, is what that says to me. Just slowly quiet that down a little bit. And now I'm so used to doing it, like I catch it even before the hand gets to the heart, where I'm really like, was that necessary? And I use humor. And I'll intersperse Sharon Salzberg. Anybody read Self-Compassion? It's an older book of hers. I highly recommend it. Sorry, not so, it's called Loving Kindness. Loving Kindness. Great book, please read it. It's a great book. It's an older book. It's a fantastic book. So she writes in the book, she's leading a metta retreat. I think it's Spirit Rock in Northern California. Loving Kindness retreat. Okay, well, she's known for that. She's great with things like that. She's leading the retreat. She gets an emergency thing. A friend has died. She has to leave. She's going to fly out to go to the funeral and be there. And she has to interrupt and leave the retreat early. She's packing quickly in her room. She knocks over a glass that shatters on the floor, breaks. She's alone in the room. And she says, because she's in the middle of this loving kindness retreat. And she's in the middle and she says right away out of her mouth, "You're so stupid." And the next moment she says, "And I love you." So can we add the "and I love you"? Does the "and I love you" ever come out? Is it there? Now what happens is eventually we tame the "you're so stupid." You're so stupid. But the thing is, when I notice responses to myself like that, the loving part comes more quickly now. And also I use humor sometimes. If I have a thought in my mind, "You're so stupid," or "What an idiotic thing to do," or something, usually I don't have as much of that anymore in my mind. But if it does come up more quickly, I'm like, well, that's a really beneficial way to think about yourself, right? Like humor's great. Humor's great as well, because it just gets me to laugh at myself too, which loosens everything up and loosens up the nasty language, the expletives at yourself, that, just as Ross said, that army training, military camp, football coach mentality. But the thing is, also understand the influences we've had around us, right? We've had so many influences of, driving yourself, do it like this, especially guys more so with that mentality that Ross mentioned, sometimes more pressure on guys like that, of that, stiff upper lip, you just do it and you're going to get them. And so again, we just want to recognize and observe that, but you don't have to overly participate in it anymore now that you're waking up. So I just found this really helpful. And then what I found is you may want to make notes from this exercise, that you notice, well, what are the differences? And here's another thing of when you're riding yourself, so you're struggling, then you start layering on negative speech, negative attitudes on yourself. What's going on underneath for you? Any ideas? What delusions are operating when you're in that space of being not kind to yourself? It's different for everybody, I'm sure. But there's one kind of heavy thing underneath of it all. What comes up for you?
Self-pity.
Sorry?
Self-pity.
Self-pity. Yes. Self-pity. Sure. Absolutely. What else comes up? Thank you.
Stop being able to do something.
Not being able to do something.
The delusion of perfection.
Delusion of perfection. Yeah. And don't these circle around, and thank you for mentioning, don't these circle around fear? I find fear drives so much negativity. A fear, I'm not going to be perfect. I'm not going to get it done. I'm questioning myself. I'm doubting myself. I'm afraid I'm not going to be heard. So the self-pity comes up. Nobody hears me. I'm alone. I'm the only one going through this. So that fear and isolation. So if I can just notice, okay, and maybe you jot down what fears come into play for you that lead you to be kind to your friend, but not yourself. You can write down little things you'd like to change. You could write down, make notes, so that you start treating yourself like a good friend. You start treating yourself like a good friend and see what happens in your life. See what unfolds from there. But again, this is a process. This isn't going to be done in 2 weeks. This is a life process, slowly, and you'll catch yourself more quickly, and be like, okay, that's not really gentle. Maybe I superimpose the face of my friend on me for a moment to say, well, when she was struggling, I was really kind, really spacious, like that. Okay, great. We're going to go on to
I think if my friend started to cry, I would be okay with that. But if I started to cry, I wouldn't be so okay with that.
And I do feel for you guys who, and this is men mostly, and I've seen it in my own family, who they're not allowed to cry. And there's something on, especially North America, I think more so. A lot of guys do. I used to really like it when, I wasn't happy if these people weren't happy, but we had a president in the States named Barack Obama, as you remember, who used to cry publicly. His Holiness the Dalai Lama cries publicly. And to me, they're pretty public, decent figures. I would layer. Everybody has different feelings, but the fact that they can show that humanity, because sometimes there's a lot of suffering and it's so overwhelming, and the tears are a release. And I find it very interesting in our cultures that a lot of people I talk with and coach and things like that, because I have this little sideline coaching business, is when they start crying, they right away say to me, I'm sorry. So if there's this kind of thing like, you need to apologize for crying. So I think it's helpful to kind of notice that. I think it's a great comment, Dave, of, I'm okay with my friend, you get your tissues out and let them have a good sob and stuff, but I'm not allowed to cry. I'm not allowed to show that vulnerability. And vulnerability is a really powerful place. for us. So we have this idea in our cultures, and a lot of you have read about vulnerability and you've listened to the Brené Brown talks and read her books and things. It's with vulnerability, we often see it as a weakness to show somebody you can't do something. You're feeling really soft right now and you're about to cry. So you don't know how to participate, right? You're feeling scared with something. You're overwhelmed by a job and you're not sure how you need to do it. You need to ask people for help. So why don't we see that as positive things? But our culture hasn't let us do that yet. But now it's starting to. Now it's starting to. And I loved when I watched one of her TED Talks, and I've read some of her books, Brené Brown, sociologist from Texas. And then she said, because she got kind of popular and famous, perhaps, corporations came to her. She's the hot thing. They wanted her to give a motivational speech. And they said, and her big things are vulnerability is the birthplace, creativity, innovation, and change. Some of you have read or heard. Innovation, creativity, and change. Well, that's pretty cool, I think. All three of those things, I think, are, and wouldn't corporations be interested in that? You know, wouldn't you like to operate from there? Because if a system's not working, you need to innovate, figure out a different way to do it. That's creative, right? And change is something that's always happening. It's the one thing we can count on. So then they said to her, we really want you to come, it's great, and, you know, but we don't want you to talk about vulnerability. So it's like they missed, again, the catch. We're still not ready to walk in there, but some of us are, obviously, some of us are. Sorry, I had this open, but it's somehow shut. Let me find my, here we go. So one thing coming to dealing also with negative mind states in a compassionate way is most of you have done courses on the mind, and I'm not going to go into a lot of course, but Tibetan Buddhism talks about consciousness, as you know, is a non-physical experience that has this unique way of attaching to the body and riding through, but it's the mind that's informing how our life will go, how that even initial fetus develops, and all based on all those karmic imprints in the consciousness in your mind. Most of you have done courses like that and you know that. Okay, it's a very unique setup compared to all the ways we've been raised and all the other things we've been taught in school, in regular school. There's the brain, and the brain has a function, but in Tibetan Buddhism, the mind is separate from the brain and it contains seeds, propensities, imprints that are made, according to Tibetan Buddhism, from past activities of your body, speech, and mind. So they create your experience, as you know. So we first want to understand this thing about the mind. And I was going to say one little etiquette thing, if it's possible, it's better to have your camera on so that you're focused here and not doing something else during the class. We want to think we're in a Gompa, and a lot of centers now are making these announcements, which I find really kind. So feel like you're attentive, you know, like that. Otherwise we start doing other stuff and, you know, the energy is there. If you're moving around a lot for some reason, then turn your camera off because it can distract people like that. So thank you very much. So again, the mind has, so what we want to first understand, and when we're dealing with delusion, is the first thing I would do as we did in the initial motivation and meditation, feel the ground under your feet at times. We are floating around out there. This pandemic has taken everybody into some swirly experience. You don't know what's coming tomorrow, right? Some of you have decent situations, and because we have food, shelter, and clothing, which I would assume for everyone here, I don't know that for sure, but I would assume those are the essentials that a lot of us probably in this program have that privilege right now and have had it through the pandemic. And we are the fortunate ones. It's amazing. The fact that we have internet and means we have electricity, those two things as well. So we can connect. There's been an amazing amount of courses online and things. It really, so we're the privileged ones. It's great. How do I want to use that now? But the main thing I find is more and more sitting. The pandemic was like a mini retreat for me in some ways, is feel the grounding. You on the cushion, on the floor, however you sit on your cushions. We miss the grounding part. Feel Mother Earth is there supporting us all the time. Put your feet on the ground. So if you start spinning out, you're layering this stuff on yourself. That's a first thing that I like to do, is to balance myself. I'm here on earth. Have a moment to reflect on the positive things going on for you. There are many. There are many. And we've talked about this in other classes I did, of that early morning meditation, and you're rejoicing at the positive things and appreciating, but really just have that moment, right? And can you then the next moment bring in, and you have so many good qualities. Yes, you do. So I know people that'll say, I have no good qualities. Well, here you are on this program. I think that's a good quality. Decided to do this, then something else today. So those two aspects, that gratitude is, it's huge. And a lot of times we take it for granted and we miss it. And I know people will wake up and go, oh, I forgot the thing, but it doesn't matter because I'm busy today and I gotta go. And there's no gratitude, no appreciation. So then as soon as we get unbalanced and a colleague says something you don't like, or something doesn't go your way, or your pain flares up to a level that is just beyond, as I know is going on for somebody in this program, you miss all that, and you forgot about that basic goodness that I am, and look at the conditions that I have. Like, the pain may be horrible, but look at the conditions around you helping you do that work. So let's not miss that. Those little fundamentals, that's number one as far as how do I deal with my mind when it's not happy. Okay, then you can bring in the exercise. The exercise of, well, I'm struggling right now. What would I say to my friend? I'm going to be my own best friend. And sorry, that sounds cliched, but for me, developing my meditation practice over years, spending time in retreat, which I can't recommend enough when you get a moment to do it. If you have a weekend to start with, maybe you one day can take yourself to a proper retreat center when the pandemic allows them to open, and really explore, maybe in a group retreat setting first, and then maybe longer on your own, and to see, because what happens is you start to develop the space of becoming your own best friend. And at first of all, say, becoming your own friend, let's just say, becoming friends with yourself, becoming friends with your mind. That has to happen, like that. But it's, again, slow process. So the beginning is jot down the notes of what I'm not friendly with in my mind. What's not going well? Why did I have to have all the expletives of what I'm doing or not doing? Why is that not beneficial? And the other thing is, when you do that to yourself, just know you're putting it out there in the world as well. So those ripples go out. I'm not laying an additional trip. I'm just talking right now. This is about observation. So we use a mindfulness practice too. Mindfulness is that big hot word the last few years that caught on, and everybody wants mindfulness courses. Okay, people that aren't even Buddhists, that's no problem. Corporations bringing in a mindfulness guru, that's all great. I think it's great. And all that means is, wow, I just layered a whole bunch of negative stuff on myself. Okay, I'm just going to sit there with it and notice why I did that. Just observe, first of all. And then can I peel back a layer and say, well, I did it because I'm really afraid of that my pain levels today are off the charts, or I'm afraid they're not going to like what I did. My boss isn't going to approve of this, that this isn't working out, that my partner's upset about something. So you start peeling back the layers to understand, okay, now what's my best response here in this space? And you start realizing it doesn't help to get down on myself. No benefit. It's not going to solve the thing at work. It may not sort the pain. It may make it worse. But mainly what happens is my mind gets tighter and tighter, more constricted, more closed, more negative. So the mindfulness in the beginning is just, can I stay with noting discomfort? right? Because life in samsara, life on the planet, is uncomfortable. Samsara, most of you know, is cycle, means to cycle, to turn. What are we turning through? Suffering, birth, old age, sickness, death, all of that suffering. Life, okay? But I'm not saying life is suffering like, oh, let's wallow in it. Life can be glorious because I understand the suffering. I'm aware, so when I do suffer, there isn't this huge, turning in on myself, raging at everybody, closing down, retreating, and I'm always like this, and I'll get into depression and anxiety, and there's no solutions. And no, it's sometimes just kind of like, wow, today was not a great day. I just observe. But the thing is, my mind's always changing. That's normal. That means tomorrow, my mind could be different. It could be a different day. It usually is. If one day's not good, usually the next day, something shifts if I allow that space. Those are just a couple little beginning exercises. Can you just be with discomfort once in a while? I know people in the United States do not like to be with discomfort for 1 minute. That's not our culture. So again, I think that's a real problem with folks in the States, where everything has to be comfortable and great, and not during the pandemic. It's not going to happen. You might have a comfortable situation, but so to add some things about that, how about if you just start, and I'm going to add these 4 questions you can ask yourself, simple questions, okay? A discomfort arises, an uncomfortable moment arises for you. Here's number 1. What am I observing? What am I noticing right now? You just stay in a meditation like that. What am I noticing? Could be a major physical discomfort. Could be mental anxiety. Just stay there. What am I observing? Number 2, what am I feeling? What am I feeling? Number 3, what am I needing right now? What am I needing right now? And number 4, do I have a request of myself or someone else? So why I'm adding this in is what really helps me deal with negative mind states. What really helps to layer some self-compassion is, can I reframe my inner dialogue? Can I reframe my inner dialogue and all those inner conversations I have that may have been very negative, okay, so that they can express empathy, okay, for my basic human needs. I'm a human being too, like my struggling friend. So think about empathy. Empathy, this big space of heart that will get down in the trenches with somebody and hang out with their suffering. It's not pity. Pity doesn't get down in the trench. Pity looks from above and says, oh, I'm so sorry for you, but I'm up here. I don't want to get my hands dirty. Empathy's down there in the trenches. It doesn't mean if someone says, my mother died, I'm really struggling with that, and your mother hasn't died, and you don't know what that's like, you can still be empathetic and hang out with them in their discomfort and their grief. So again, you're expressing empathy. And here's the thing, your basic human needs. We're human beings. We're not Buddhas yet. I actually don't know the level of your mind, so I can't say. But if you feel that you're a human being, it means you will suffer from some imbalances in your mind. Delusion is what they're called, as you know. That's normal. So how come we don't allow ourselves that at times? Right? Because we want to be perfect. We want to be a Buddha. Somebody mentioned perfection. I thought that was a great thing. We need to stand up to this thing. It's great to have the goal of enlightenment, to be a perfect being, to fully manifest your Buddha nature, which every human being has. Every human being has, as you know. Buddha nature means I have a potential to be a Buddha. It doesn't mean I'm a Buddha yet. I have a potential. So the thing is, everyone with a mind has that on planet Earth. So here's one thing of seeing the basic goodness in all beings, but allowing myself to see my basic goodness, but realizing I'm a human right now. And that means I will have some flaws and I'm working on them. So again, you can see the balance coming in, the balance coming in. So again, the reframing is very key. Pre-framing can also be helpful. Pre-framing. And I think Deki Lee, Sharon, Runas, a lot of people are familiar with the FDCW work, Foundation for Developing Compassion and Wisdom, which is part of the FPMT, where a lot of people talk about pre-framing a situation and reframing. Pre-framing could be you're about to go into a meeting on Zoom for your work. There's tension, there's colleagues there that you don't like, that don't like you, possibly a stress with your boss, and you have to present a report and all that. Why not pre-frame it with, I'm going to do my best, I'm prepared, going to be as prepared as possible. I'm going to jot down any possible questions that might snag me that I think could come up, and I want to be prepared for those. And I'm really going to trust the basic goodness of all beings, even if that's not what appears to me, but I know that's there. I know I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to be gentle with myself in the process and be able to possibly say at some point, I don't know. If I don't know, if that's okay, but I will find out. I will sort that. So these are ways I go into the meeting with a more positive basis. But those 4 questions also help me reframe the negative talk in my mind when I can, with a level of mindfulness and compassion. Those questions allow you to kind of deeply listen to what you might need in the moment, what you need most in the moment. Right. So first, what happens is you're looking at, reframing these inner messages. And then the next step you have is tuning in to feelings that are the basis of those harsh words to yourself. Tune into those feelings. What am I feeling? Well, I'm really feeling frustrated. I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. Can I just notice that instead of layering more negativity on myself? Well, I'm really afraid right now, or I'm irritated with myself. And then the third layer, that third question is, what am I needing right now? Okay. Examine some maybe unmet needs for yourself that fuel that reaction, the negative reaction, right? And then finally, the last one is, do I have a request of myself or someone else? You consider if there's anything that you really need to ask yourself, that you need of yourself, or maybe you need someone else to help you, and that's okay. That's a big step for some people, asking someone else for help. It's a big step. So here's the main thing about it, those 4 questions, is you validate and listen to what you really need in the moment, okay? You express empathy toward yourself rather than condemnation. And think about the word validate. Validate. That's mostly what everybody wants, is to say, I'm hurting, and people are like, yes, I understand. I hear that. Okay. So, but the thing is, I need to do it with myself in mind. Need to hear what I'm saying to myself. And that gets tuned out, and that gets ignored. And then I'm frustrated and angry, fearful, can't do it, overwhelmed. So it's okay to just have a moment where you sit down and cry if you need to cry, or you just acknowledge, this is really hard work right now. Okay, so let me figure out what I need to do. But I'm hearing what I need to do is I'm observing, I feel this, I'm over, I've got all this tasks. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I might need to do this for myself. I might need to ask somebody for help. All very balanced and real of what we're going through. I just had an example with the pilgrimage that Dave mentioned, pilgrimage to Laudo. It's extraordinary. I hope you can join, but we had postponed it obviously because of the pandemic. Next spring, April, May is when we were going to go, late April, beginning May. it's getting to time where people need to know. And we have a group of 15 ready to go, but we have space for more. But the tour coordinator, I asked her, and then I was kind of like, one person asked me, are we going? We need to let people know now. So again, like, I very much want to go. I've taken on a new position, so I'm busy with that, and maybe very busy in April, but I'm willing to do it if the group wants to do it. And what do I need? So at first there was confusion of somebody asking me, rattling me, are we going? Are we not going? And I get into like, well, will they come if we postpone it again? What's the best thing to do? Will we, and so then I just thought, well, I'm observing all of that busyness because I'm busy. And I'm feeling conflicted. What's best to do? That was my second one. What do I need to do? Contact the tour coordinator, who's a good friend, wonderful. Let's assess, and I asked for her help. I think, do we need to assess how many could go this spring? We're more worried about safety and COVID. That's the main thing. So, so then so I asked her, I reached out, we'll make a decision, and it's fine now. It's fine. I talked to a few people. Can you postpone whatever? And they understand. They don't want to bring COVID back up to the mountains again, to the 4 old people living at Laudo. So we discussed that. 2023 gives people more time, more space, and more safety, hopefully, if the pandemic gets a little bit better. But there's an unknown. We don't know. So, another part is, can we be okay with the unknown? Can we be okay with the unknown? Like that. Okay. We're going to do a self-compassion exercise. And then I'll take some questions as well. And I want to talk about, before we do this exercise, our 3 main components. And I started talking about mindfulness already. Okay. And I'll just mention some things more about self-compassion too. It softens the effects of negative influences in our lives, for one. We talked about those influences. So when I start practicing self-compassion more and more, being kind to myself, doing some of these exercises, it softens those negative influences in our lives overall. And I'll give an example is when I was living in Philadelphia around my family, who are great, but this season right now, they're really into American football. And I find American football really violent. And the culture around it, I find the game contributes to kind of a little bit of a volatile, violent culture, competitive and with an edge that I don't really like. And so they want to watch the game, and then while they're watching the game, sometimes they want me to, can you come? If I didn't come, well, you don't want to spend time with us. Well, I do, but maybe doing something other than watching football, And because I felt good enough about myself in the self-compassion, it didn't rattle me, where now I go into like, well, now they're going to question, I want to spend time. Then they won't want to spend time with me. And then I'm alone. And then, and all these other things that could come up. But I'm just like, no, I love spending time, balanced way. But the negative influence. So there was a day I went over to watch a game with them and notice kind of some of the hostile talk, the competitive talk that goes on with this team. We got to get them, and we, and then seeing this one play that was very violent, and the guy really got kind of bashed on the field, and I could see one person who was very kind of aggressive suddenly wince, like and turn to me, knowing my feelings about it, and said, kind of shook his head and said, it's so violent, like really meaning it. So rather than me letting those influences come to me, where I start going, yeah, they need to win, they need to beat them, and is somehow that I was soft about it, not laying a judgment on anybody. And then they somehow merge into my thing of it is really violent game. So slowly, but I'm aware of those negative influences, but not in a overly judgmental way, because I'm not judging myself too. So I stopped judging others. How about that? Okay. And self-compassion, it's also, as you know, related, contributes to life satisfaction, emotional intelligence, social connectedness, like that. And that's what we need, especially in the pandemic now, where people ended up with a lot of self-criticism because a lot of people are living alone or in their small bubble without this kind of social framework and web that's been going on where you have different distractions. It's contributed heavily, as you know, to depression and anxiety, especially in young people, right? Rumination, how about that? That's what the lack of self-compassion contributes. A ruminating, obsessive mind over and over. You know, again, just what Ross was saying, over and over, layering that inner dialogue onto yourself, heavy, and then it becomes a habit, so you do it again and again. Right? And notice, just as one thing, for many of us, how we solidify negativity. Okay, you solidify negativity the more you choose to focus on it. Just the way positive mind states help us to contribute that to mental health and a habit of that. Okay, so with self-compassion, you loosen your hold on negative speech, can loosen your hold on that. So I want to talk about, before we do this exercise, some core components, 3 core components that I found in a lot of self-compassion work and things like that. Right? And when bad things happen to you, think about where you often go. 3 unfortunate reactions that happen: self-criticism, self-isolation, and self-absorption. So again, with my mindfulness, can I just notice that? Can I notice that? You know, more and more over the years, I've caught some of those patterns in my mind, and then I have found my coping mechanisms. I mentioned one already, that was humor. Another one is mindfulness, just sometimes staying with the discomfort, you know, because it'll change. My mind's changing. I have faith that my mind changes all the time. And there's a lot of positive, healthy habits in my mind now. So sometimes the other one will take over, a delusion will come in. And if I wait and apply certain antidotes and I'm kind to myself, it softens it. And sometimes I can change it more quickly now. Sometimes I can change it more quickly now. So first you have the self-criticism going on, then the self-isolation comes. So the more I stay alone in that thing, I'm going to solidify that I'm no good, that I'm a jerk. This is terrible. I can't sort this. I never do anything right. Nobody cares for me. I'm alone in my experience. How many times those? Okay. But then you get the self-absorption. It's all caught up in yourself. Triggers that as well. Then I can't think about anyone else. So it's kind of the antithesis of Mahayana Buddhism, which is all about getting enlightened to benefit all living beings. So in that space, and so if I really want to be a Mahayana Buddhist, I have to say, wow, look at all the sitting in your mind you're doing right now. It's all about you, isn't it? I'm like, that's not my path. Sometimes it is about me and I'm just watching the delusion, but then I can more quickly say, like, what was my motivation this morning? Oh, right. I wanted to get enlightened to benefit all living beings. Well, the all includes yourself. That's okay, but in a balanced way, not in a self-absorbed way, overly self-absorbed way. So 3 components that come in to add self-kindness, okay, is I already started to talk about mindfulness. Okay? So I'm holding, with mindfulness, holding my experience with balanced awareness, okay, rather than ignoring the pain that I'm in, or here's the other thing, exaggerating it, whatever mental or physical discomfort, holding my experience with balanced awareness. I'm observing, okay? And then we also have something I'll call common or shared humanity. Step number 2, the second component, common or shared humanity. A lot of us have heard those terms. Feeling connected with others in the experience of life rather than isolation, rather than alienation. And then we come to loving kindness, self-kindness, you can call both. Okay? That we're gentle and understanding with ourselves. Gentle and understanding. Because I've already come from, well, other people experience this too with the shared humanity. So I realized, well, everybody goes through this. Why am I so hard on myself? And Lama Yeshe's famous quote, be gentle with yourself, and then you'll be gentle with all others. So it always starts with ourselves, but with the bigger motivation in mind. That. So we're going to do a brief exercise in self-compassion break, and then I'll take some questions. Many of you already do this, I'm sure. I find this really helpful. So I'd like you to just find a comfortable posture. Go back to that meditation posture. And lightly close your eyes. And feel that grounding again. You are supported. There is support for you. It's not just the earth, but it's all of the people that love you. All of the resources that are available in a healthy, positive way are there on the earth that can support you. So first, it's very nice to consider that. I'd like you to come up with a situation in your life right now that is difficult, a situation that is causing you stress right now. Call the situation to mind. And see if you can actually feel the stress and emotional discomfort in your body. So we're going to use mindfulness right now to look at this discomfort. Okay? And here's what mindfulness says. I'd like you to just say this in your mind in relation to this situation you brought up. This is a moment of suffering. And here are some other options. This really hurts. I am in a lot of pain right now. This is stress. Or perhaps even ouch. Just find your own saying with mindfulness. Using that saying, just observe the situation. Now here's using our common or shared humanity to deal with the situation you brought up. Second key component, using the common or shared humanity with this line. Suffering is a part of life. You could also use this as samsara's nature. Or many other people feel this way. I'm not alone. We all struggle in our lives. So find your saying, what works best for you, observing the situation you brought up in your mind, using shared humanity right now. Using loving kindness now. Using loving kindness, self-kindness, okay? You may want to put a hand to your heart. You may want to hug yourself. Clasp your hands, just feel the warmth of them. Some gentle touch that you feel feels right for you. As you say to yourself, may I be kind to myself. May I be kind to myself. And you can also ask yourself, related to the situation you brought up in your mind, what do I need to hear right now to express kindness to myself? What do I need to hear right now to express kindness to myself? So is there a phrase that may speak to you in this particular situation? For instance, may I give myself the compassion that I need? Or may I learn to accept myself as I am? Or may I be strong? May I be patient? Or perhaps, may I forgive myself? So please relax. Feel free to jot down any notes you'd like to make. And we will come back to this self-compassion exercise. Very simple, it's very helpful. Again, using mindfulness, our shared humanity, and self-kindness or loving kindness directed towards ourself. And thank you very much from Kristen Neff for that exercise. I really like that. So please, as you slowly open your eyes and return to our group, are there any questions right now before we take a break in about 20 minutes?
Hi, Venerable Amy. I'd like to ask a question. This is Manoshi. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the difference between self-compassion versus what they say in Buddhism is self-cherishing.
Yes, great question. And I also see in the chat, I don't often focus on it when I'm teaching. I was quick to embrace my own heart, but I perceived my friend would be stern or upset. So I'm not exactly sure, Jesse, what you mean by that. You were kind to yourself, but your friend was upset or something. I'm not exactly sure, but you can comment after Manoshi's question. And then my self-compassion break usually involves ice cream, which does not have those long-term benefits the self-compassion meditation brings. Lovely. I'll get to that in a moment. Thank you, Dave. So Manoshi's talking about the main Buddhist idea of avoiding self-cherishing. We hear self-cherishing all the time. We also hear about self-grasping, but we're going to focus on self-cherishing. How does it differ from self-compassion? Self-cherishing is the self-absorption I talked about before, the negative aspects, meaning you're going to have the self-criticism, then I isolate, I'm in pain, something's going wrong, I had a fight with my boss, my partner walked out, and the self-criticism, I never do anything right, I'm a terrible partner, I hate my boss, why did I take this job, I'm so stupid, you get into that kind of thing. And then you start isolating as a second thing they mentioned of where the mind turns negative. Isolate, I don't want to talk to my colleagues, I'm alone now, my partner walked out, I don't want to call my friends, I'm just going to eat ice cream, right? But all that negative isolation, like as if nobody experiences what you're experiencing. I've forgotten the shared humanity. Then you come to self-absorption. Self-absorption, okay? So the self-absorption is, it's all about me, and I ruminate, and I did something wrong, and I can't stand the boss, and I hate these colleagues, and I hate my job, and I want to move, and I want to, and over, you start turning through the self-absorption, which is about self-cherishing. It's all about me. It's all about me. And that's all I can think about. Not any regard for anyone around me, and not any regard that other people are experiencing the same thing. Not any regard that I can just realize and hang out with this discomfort because this is part of life. So the self-compassion comes in then and says, let's find a balanced way that, because you are a living being, you are a sentient being, to be kind to yourself in the process of the work you need to do to either fix the situation or to have a broader perspective, a healthier perspective about the situation. That's where I feel self-compassion lends, where self-cherishing is an imbalanced negative absorption on the self without healthy remedies. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Now, I wanted to get to the ice cream comment, which is a great comment. So when I also mentioned, what's also key is it's not only the first things I mentioned of, having gratitude for your compassionate things in life, the good situation you have now. I mentioned food, shelter, clothing, okay? And then realizing in that space of my good qualities, okay? But, and we do these self-compassion exercises, meaning first I realize I'm going through something. Well, this is suffering, and suffering is a part of life. Yep. Can I just stay there with the mindfulness for a little while and realize? Second part, the shared humanity. Other people go through this too. I am not alone in this situation. I may feel like I'm alone. I'm not with those other people, but I know that on the planet, there's a lot of this going on. Yeah. Number 3, okay, let me be kind to my hand to my heart, hugging myself, whatever speaks to you as a gesture, something kind, but here's in the rest of life, okay? I know this with people, a lot of times it's used in grief counseling, people that have just lost a dear loved one suddenly or due to long-term illness or old age. There's a grieving process. Some people are not that kind to themselves in the process, but some people are. And it's partly about surrounding yourself with supportive people, making sure you're physically taking care of yourself by eating properly, trying to get some sleep, which is often badly interrupted, you know, like this. But I find it's very important at that time to also do kind things for ourselves. But I translate that into everyday life anyway. Why not have the habits there? And what I mean is, if you like ice cream and it's your favorite food, why not once in a while have ice cream? What's the problem? But let's enjoy and eat the ice cream by, and as Lama Yeshe would say, by touching reality. Meaning you see the ice cream, you know it is not the source of your ultimate happiness, but it's delicious and it looks nice. And you get your favorite flavor, right? And you don't need to overdo it. You don't need to have 3 scoops, do you? Because then you'll feel like, oh, that was too much. But enjoy it. And then let's eat it by touching reality. You can lick it, it's delicious, it's cool. A lot of people, once they go into winter, are not eating it as much, but some people like it, why not? And so you enjoy it, but again, Lama Zopa Rinpoche would say, be clear about the ice cream or the chocolate. The real pleasure, you want to analyze the real pleasure of something so we don't get overly attached. What do I mean by that? Well, the real pleasure of your favorite food, like that, an attachment you might have to food, is from here to here, from your mouth to the throat. That's it. Once it passes here, it's kind of gone. There might be a little aftertaste, but so let's be realistic about it. You know, not like that's all you talk about and you didn't get the right flavor and now you're upset with your partner and I need to have more chocolate and how come you ate the last piece in the box? And let's look at it for what it is. And chocolate and ice cream are mundane, but why can't we have them once in a while? But what other kind things can you do for yourself, right? For some people, it's you're working too hard. It's a beautiful day. Go out for a walk. You know, what if you don't have that much time to walk? 10 minutes? You can't go outside for 10 minutes and walk around the block? What happens for 10 minutes? And here's another little catch I would do for your walk, right, is leave the phone at home. Right? Or if you want to track your steps, whatever, put your phone in your pocket, turn the sounds off, right? And make a little deal with yourself. I'm not answering the phone for this 10-minute walk. And go out and look at nature. Okay? So I know in Canada now you're going into winter, the leaves have fallen off the trees, same thing on different parts of the country of the US. Absolutely, but people live in different places. It doesn't matter. I still enjoy going out, walking it, seeing how, you know, now that the leaves fell off of the tree, I can see behind the building through the woods and what's there. I can, if the leaves are off the trees and you go for a walk around sunset, you're more readily able to see the moon rise like that because the leaves aren't blocking like that. So there's different aspects you see. You see the change in the neighborhood of what trees and what flowers have finished. So it helps you appreciate in the spring when the flowers are there. And just go out and observe the new building they're building down there. Wow, look at that huge side of the house they just added on, and look at how they're doing it, and look how fast it's going up. You just notice stuff. You might even say hello to some neighbor, friendly thing. So there's connection. You're not isolated. There's other people there. See what they're doing. People, and there might be somebody that needs help. Okay, so slowly there's an, you know, so do something kind. For me, sometimes I just put myself in the bathtub. That's like a, you know, I just need to stop, you know, a little bit healing. I like the warm water. Boom. That's it. I'm not going to be on the phone there. I'm not going to be, that's it. Have your time, light a little candle, set the lights how you want, put your favorite salts in or whatever you do. I don't know, but slowly like that. So do something kind. You really want to see a friend and go out for a nice meal. You want to make dinner for someone. You want to buy somebody flowers. That makes you happy. That's okay. I mean, it's also generosity, but it's okay to do those things that light you up. If you can do one a day, and it can be little things. It doesn't have to be any grand thing, little things. But at least once or twice a week, some kindness to yourself that is balanced and realistic. Why not? Because then we exercise that and then we're more readily able to do it for someone else as well. But we need it as well. It's okay. You're a human being and you need some tending. Other questions?
You
Ross.
talked about in sort of exercise 2, 3 elements. The second one being shared humanity. The third one being loving kindness. What was the first one?
Mindfulness.
Thank you very much.
Mindfulness would say, this is a moment of suffering. Or I'm really suffering right now. Again, mindfulness is again that being there, hanging with your discomfort, just being with it and observing. Like, I know it's not pleasant, but the thing is, the more and more, a lot of my spiritual practice is getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. Okay, because life in samsara is uncomfortable. And a lot of us live pretty comfortable lives, I'd say. Okay, so when the discomfort shows up, we're doing anything we can to squirm our way out of it. And some people get into really unhealthy patterns to get out of it. So what if I just show up to observe? Yeah, this is life. This is life on the planet. Dave. Can you unmute, Dave?
Didn't, there we go.
There you go.
Right, I was trying on that. So yeah, question came on a personal chat. Question is, how do you cope when you live with someone who's mostly self-cherishing?
How do you cope when you live with someone who is
Mostly self-cherishing.
emotionally self-cherishing?
Mostly, who's mostly
Mostly
self-cherishing.
self-cherishing.
Yep.
Isn't that most of us? Right? I mean, think about how much time you spend thinking about yourself. Let's be honest, 98% of the day, But again, some people seem to exhibit it more than other people. So I would think kindly, I mean, I'll put a situation. I lived with someone once like that. It appeared to me that they had a dominance of that. But part of it is I had to observe my own self-cherishing in the space. I countered it sometimes with humor, like when, you're in a space sharing something and then they were just all about them. And I'd make a joke and say, oh, okay, so you're the only one that lives here, or you're the only one that, is using this thing, or, in a light way, that I could joke with them about, not knowing my relationship with them. And there were times when I would tune out a little bit when they were demanding about something that they needed. And I just, I'd listen for a little bit and then be like, oh, excuse me, I've got to go do this other thing right now. Like cutting it off, like not giving airtime to it. And depending on your relationship with the person, can you, in an appropriate time and space, dialogue with them about a way they might be able to reframe their perspective? Like, does that view, is it contributing to your happiness? You might have a conversation like that. It doesn't seem you're really happy when you're in that space. Have you ever thought about thinking about it like this? Sometimes I've gotten people like to join me in a volunteer effort. Let's go out and deliver something to this old person. And that kind of a little bit for that moment got them out of their thing and they were happy. They liked that. Let's go visit this person who's shut in because they're really ill. And then there wasn't space for them it wasn't about them because the other person was really suffering. So there's a combination of things you can do. I don't know if that helps. And you can also say more specifics of that. Like, is it a partner? Is it just a housemate? Is it a colleague? So I don't know if that's helpful.
Can I just come in there, because what you
Please.
said was, how do you find the balance between what you just described? By going out and helping someone else, you are, you're taken away from your own self-absorption. Yet when you go back into yourself, you're in your self-absorption again. So it's like as if by being with others, in fact, how can I put it? You can suddenly not be self-absorbed. So there is some sort of balance. How, I suppose what you said about emotional balance, there's something there. I'm not sure I can actually even describe what I'm trying to say, but I guess it's like being the helper, being the therapist, being, and then going back into yourself and having this space where actually you are so needy and self-absorbed. How do you balance the two so that it becomes more leveled out?
Right. Okay. So you're saying yourself, and then you decide, well, I'll go volunteer and that will help me rise out of this. But then I think it's just basic reality, facing reality in getting to know your own mind. Okay, which is a huge passage of meditation and the study of Tibetan Buddhism that we are doing. Now, this is not really rooted in Tibetan Buddhism, what I'm talking about, the self-compassion exercises, but I'm talking about our overview with Lama Yeshe Ling is what we're really on a path of a Tibetan Buddhist study of the philosophy. So that whole premise is on one level, and especially for Westerners, which is a lot of us, is acknowledging that a lot of my life is spent pretty self-absorbed, self-chart. Like I'm just going to acknowledge, and I'm a nun, and I've been a nun for a long time on this path, but I'm a human being. I have needs. I watch it, a lot of it, and I try to balance them where it's not overwhelming. But I acknowledge that, hey, a lot of my day is spent on what do I want to do? What am I doing today? But I balance it. And then I really try to insert a lot of activities and exercises. I have my meditation practice, for one, that happens every day. So that alone lets me look at the self-absorption daily and use antidotes to counter it more and more, which we're going to talk about after the break. And so what I do is then you go out in the world. And right now I'll say I'm out in the world where I'm in my room, but meaning I'm teaching a course where I'm really honestly thinking a lot about you and how to make it most useful for all of you. And I prepared things and, meditations and got this course ready and things like that. So that's kind of, I really want to give back. And you have to check your motivation for everything. So like I could go volunteer at a soup kitchen and be like, well, I want people to see, I hope people see that to see how great I am. So that's a self-absorbed motivation, self-cherishing motivation. That's not, I just really want to help these people and they were short a person today. So I want to go and I can go and help. And I'll really try to interact with these people. I'm sure they're lonely. They need help. They want a friendly face. They don't want people to look at them like they're crazy. So there's different motivations we go out. I do know people that volunteer and go out there and it's all about self-cherishing for them. It's a photo op or something. So again, we have to check the motive. I know there's people that teach and it's all about their own business. And I'm working with somebody now that just in coaching where she has another teacher that kind of professed to be a spiritual teacher. And it's like a lay person in another country who is really, it just seems she's more and more what she tells me, it's like a business. She's just in it to make money. And so the student's feeling really uncomfortable and is saying to me, what do I do? Like it's, so we have to be honest. And so I think it's a balance, our spiritual practice, right? We acknowledge a human being. I make mistakes. I have self-cherishing. I have all the delusions operating to some degree, but I'm really working to balance them so that they're not taking over my mind and life and that's dominating my experience. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. It makes sense. Thank you. Absolutely.
And you do the best you can, right? So one thing I was going to say for everybody, please, in this, especially when we talk about self-compassion, especially when we talk about the heart of Tibetan Buddhism is Bodhichitta. All of you, most of you know that word, Bodhichitta, the enlightened attitude. Bodhi is enlightenment, Chitta is mind. The mind of enlightenment is, I want to get enlightened to benefit all living beings. That's the heart. That's developing your good heart, which involves compassion, self-compassion, empathy, those good qualities. It's all about the other person, but I'm realizing I'm a part of this and I have to take care of myself and get myself together, get my mind and heart together in as open, balanced space as possible to do that work. That heart is really the crux of all that we're doing, you know, where it's all layered on. And so part of that is you have to realize your place in it and you have to be patient with your progress. And please, you have to be good to yourself in this process. It's really, really important. We forget in Tibetan Buddhism, it's all about other beings. So you sacrifice and shred yourself for other beings, and then you're angry and you're miserable and you're done and that doesn't work. That doesn't work. I've been there. That's self-cherishing too, right? And here's another thing of basic laziness in a way, where we busy ourselves up too much. We busy ourselves up too much and saying that's part of the path. Now, part of the path is, like, I'm very busy right now and with helping Land of Medicine Buddha in California. And I am really busy and I'm still trying to keep it balanced because I do need my own practice every day. I have to make time for that and some other things. And so I'm trying to do it with more awareness and not get swallowed up in the process where then I'm angry and not helpful to anybody, you know, and overwhelmed. And that doesn't work either. So I found, like, through my past work at other centers, when I did it like that, that didn't work. So now I'm trying to establish a new basis to see, can I really keep giving to this process and be bright and positive about it? And so far, you know, so far so good, and a little bit like that. So please be patient with yourself. That's part of self-compassion. We're very impatient. In the States, terribly impatient right now. You know, people start meditating and then 2 months later they go, well, I still get angry. Please give yourself space and time. This isn't a path of 2 months. This is lifetimes. And we can do it. And it's exciting. We are doing it step by step. And sometimes the path is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The exciting thing, though, is you're still going forward like that. And if we go too far back, sometimes you fall flat on your face. Well, pick yourself up, have a look around, observe, wow, what are the lessons? And can I take those lessons in right now so that I don't have to repeat that? But again, we sometimes take a step back and then off you go like that. So let's take a break. We have a break, I believe, of 1 hour. Is that right? Okay, let's take a break for an hour. What I'd like you to also do in the break time, please have some tea, have a meal, whatever you'd like, is I'd like you to think about the self-compassion things of, can you reframe the story in your head? Keep working on that one. Like, what's a kind way for me to think about it? What's was I over embellishing parts of it that really aren't accurate? What's a more balanced way to reframe that in my mind, which lends to broader perspective for me? Am I seeing all the aspects of it? You know, how much self-cherishing is involved in that? Okay, well, I'll just acknowledge that. That's okay. And could I possibly see, and if it's involving someone else, have we ever thought about what is their perspective? What's their perspective? We didn't think about that. It's just about, I'm disturbed. I don't like this. We ever think about their motivation? What's it like to be them looking back at me, looking through their eyes back at me in a situation? And what other kinds of very realistic self-compassion tools would you like to include in your life? Meaning, what kind of kind acts would you like to start practicing this week? What can you realistically do that you haven't been doing already? What could you increase a little bit? Like that. Some of you may be very balanced with stuff, but what would you like to turn on? What light needs to go on a little bit that you can start doing? And it could be even, some of you are partners here, I know that. So even in your relationship, are you growing your relationship? Is a nice way to practice self-compassion too, even though it's about another, but it's also, sometimes people get into ruts in relationships and they have certain habits. Or is there some other kindness that for me to also enjoy being here that I need to show my partner? Maybe that's something to explore. So let's just briefly dedicate for this hour. I'd like to dedicate whatever positive energy or merit we've created. May it really help us reach into our hearts with mindfulness, shared humanity, loving kindness, to have a more expansive place for our own hearts and minds so we can share that with all beings that we encounter. Also, if you can keep in your hearts right now, a man named Sean Tanaka. Sean Tanaka is a lovely man who's one of our main volunteers for Shanti Deva Center in New York. Incredible guy. He's helped them with so many things. Had major heart surgery the other day. And it was very, very serious. So he's in the ICU, critical but stable condition. Sean Tanaka, if you can just keep him in your hearts. He's going to have a long haul recovery. We're just hoping it will all go well. And he's a little bit isolated in New York. So the center's really helping him out, and just keep him in your thoughts. He's a lovely guy. And sorry, there's one more comment. Treating yourself like a good friend is also referenced in abuse recovery, indeed, by asking what you're accepting is something you would accept being done to a friend. So I think that's a really good anonymous comment from someone. Absolutely. Is, what you are accepting, is that something that you would accept that's happening to a friend? So I think that's helpful to think about treating yourself like a good friend. So I have 10:08 right now, which is 1:08 your time. So 2:08 roughly, should we come back?
Sure. Yeah, we're scheduled for 2, but we can. I'll be there at 2, and then we'll let everybody know. It'll be more like that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Should we sign off and then sign back in?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. See you in about an hour.
And we can just stop the recording momentarily. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. And what is helpful is this is a perfect time, and this is something that really balances the mind, I find, is to reset the motivation. So any time in life you find yourself off balance, a great self-compassion tool I use is, oh, wait a minute, what about my motivation? I use it like an anchor, so that it returns me back to the positive awareness and the direction I was moving in. We get distracted all day long, right? And some of those distractions are not really helpful, and a lot of them come in through our devices. So for me, a lot of it is then back to the motivation. So just take a moment and close your eyes if you like. Can we mute the microphones for a moment? Thank you. Just returning to your breath for a moment to settle the mind after our break. Feel the grounding. Feel some stability, that it is there even when we're flying around. You can sometimes imagine yourself landing on the earth smoothly, softly. And we learn to soften that landing more and more in our practice. And from here, considering a motivation we may have set earlier, returning to that. So again, orienting yourself in that most beneficial way. Thank you. I want to bring in some notes as well. And as far as we've all had different experiences in the pandemic. So I, for one, had a positive experience just based on the food, clothing, shelter situation I have, very fortunate. But I also got some projects completed that I was unable to do with all the touring I've been doing for 16 years. One of those projects, I'm sure some of you have had interest to do this, but I had 34 years of Dharma notes, if you know what I mean. Notebooks, all the courses, all the retreats I've ever been at, taking up some boxes. I don't so much have a real proper place to live, so I was in my parents' house at that time, and when I moved it from California to Vermont to Philadelphia, I remember thinking, I'm not moving these notes anymore. This is it. So I'm going to figure something out. My brother turned up with a high-speed scanner, and that was the magic message, high-speed scanner. So he agreed with me. He looked at the notes and he said, if you want to prepare these sheets of paper, out of the notebooks, no staples, over the course of the year, small pieces, bit by bit, it's all scanned in and I can use it, and it's all on my computer now, categorized by topic. Because you never look at the notebooks. Most of my friends said they never look at those notes again. Rarely did they pull out a notebook. I think Dave and Minoshi, kind of what I'm talking about. You've been at this for a long time. Some of the rest of you, Sharon. And so it's been great because I can find some notes now. This one I wanted to read. I wanted to read some pieces from this I really like. Think about, and I don't mean to lay trips on Judeo. Sorry? Oh, somebody's unmuted. Okay, sorry. I don't mean to lay trips on Judeo-Christian culture, okay? But let me just read this. And for those of you that practice Tantra, okay, this is culture that most of us have been raised in, that tends to emphasize our fallen, sinful nature. Think about it. And I've asked many of my friends, and I'm happy to dialogue with some of you, for instance, why is low self-esteem such an issue for us? And having positive self-esteem is not the same as self-compassion, because self-esteem still incorporates things such as, some idea of competitiveness and, weighing yourself against other people's things. Self-compassion is simply this balance of taking care of myself, and I like with Tibetan Buddhism, so I can help try to take care of others too. But we somehow, many Westerners I know, cart around this terrible self-esteem issue. They're never good enough, the guilt trips. And I've really looked at it with friends, and a lot of us question whether this idea of original sin, it's pretty heavy, okay? But I'm not saying there's anything, if those are your traditions, follow those traditions. It's better to stay in your own tradition rather than having to change something. But some of us have explored other things, have changed. So think about this emphasis on our fallen, sinful nature. So it kind of exacerbates a lack, this lack of intrinsic value of positive thing. Okay, it kind of creates a bleak and depressive attitude towards human nature. Okay, as a bleak and depressive attitude that we are fundamentally flawed. Now, for me in Buddhism, I acknowledge as humans we're fundamentally flawed, but I don't acknowledge it with a whole heavy trip around it. I look at Buddha nature, I go, wow, I'm headed there. I really want to get there. And right now I have some limitations. That's natural as a human. So I'm working on it. So for me, do you see the difference? It's like a very positive, buoyant springboard rather than like you're flawed, you did something wrong, it's your fault. And you kind of need to do some penance. And if not, we're going to feel guilty about it. And for me, it really holds my mind down in that respect. So I'm looking to find a buoyant springboard. Okay. So what we tend to do is kind of struggle against this less fortunate side and find a way to cast out the badness, like in the way we were raised often. Okay. And then to kind of see if salvation's possible. And the way salvation tends to be possible is through some kind of selfless savior that's going to do it for us. So it takes all my power away. And these are just things I've kind of come to in myself and some of the notes from some of the things I was reading, okay? So to become enlightened, it's not about perfecting our relative state of being, but becomes, a lot of it is recognizing our true nature. So you have to recognize first the humanness, okay? So those for those of you with highest yoga tantra, and for those of you not, just bear with me for a moment, because I know there's people at different levels, and it's nice to kind of have, you know, something for if you're at a deeper level of practice. So let's look at the word yidam. A lot of us do highest yoga tantra practice, meaning we first been formally, traditionally empowered or initiated by a qualified Vajra guru, a teacher at that level, like someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, okay? And through that, it's a certain tantric practice which swirls around an image of a certain manifestation of Buddhahood, certain deity, I'll say. And there's many, many different deities. Some of you have been told by a certain teacher of yours, this is your deity, your yidam, Y-I-D-A-M, okay? Yidam, heart bound, is the literal meaning, heart bound. Let's think about this, heart bound, to signify a heart connection, okay, to the inner guru symbolizes the deity, okay? Even the word guru is really about the innate wisdom of non-duality. That's Dharmakaya, truth body of the Buddha, innate wisdom of non-duality. Well, that's what we all want, innate wisdom of non-duality. So it's very challenging for me to find it with a separate savior creator that, you know, creates an us and them kind of thing, with me being bad down here and this symbolized, where the Buddha in our tradition is simply an external manifestation of the highest level of that innate wisdom and non-duality in my own mind. Guru, that's really guru. We have an issue with the word guru in our tradition, in Western culture. G-U-R-U is a Sanskrit term indicating virtuous friend, okay? Real emphasis on virtuous, but this is a being that can turn your mind to its true nature, positive, virtuous mind states like that. So that's the real meaning. It's really a spiritual guide. They say in Tibetan, Lama, Lama, one who is heavy. What does it mean? Heavy with realizations. So we need somebody who knows more than us. We need somebody, in my case, I always use this image of the treasure chest. So for me, Lama Zopa Rinpoche has been showing me the map over years. He's been trying to shortcut me with showing, like, you can go through there, that's a shortcut to the treasure, you know. But what happens is, realistically, we need to find our path. And for each of us here, 22 some people, right? We all have 22 different paths to the treasure chest or the top of the mountain. So there's a part of it individualistically, we need to find our way. And we might walk together. Like right now, we're walking together for 3 hours today. That's brilliant. It's wonderful to have friends and share that path and check in with each other and support each other. Have centers like Lama Yeshe Ling, fantastic, like that, so that you have that supportive network. But then at times you're going to go off and go, I need to do a retreat over here. I think I'll go on this pilgrimage. I'm going to go to Bodh Gaya and do prostrations. I'm going to end up running this center and doing that. That's what that has aligned with what I'm doing. And then at times you want to check in with that spiritual friend, that virtuous friend. If you believe and have faith that they can shortcut that path. And we build the faith through checking little things with them that we follow, little pieces of advice that we've asked, that we follow as best as we can. And then you yourself need to check the results. How's my mind? Did that benefit me or not? What did I get out of that? Because then it might empower you to ask another piece of advice and then to follow that advice. So we don't want to ask the advice and not follow, okay? But that person, you develop faith where you go, that was really great for me. So now I have more faith. I want to ask them. And slowly you develop a very close relationship with this person who capital K knows, K-N-O-W. They know more than you do. They've seen, they know the path to the treasure chest. And all they really want you to do is get there, because that means freedom of your suffering and for you to be empowered to do what they do. And it's a process. And so what happens at times, and I'd say this is okay, is sometimes they show you the map and you go, well, that's shorter, but that looks like it's really going to be harder. So I think I'm going to go over here, this direction, where I can have a nap under the tree. I can have a nice picnic, and and then it's going to take you longer. But again, we have to determine that ourselves and figure out the lessons we get from that, when we're ready to bear more hardship, when we're ready to really go for it. Some people are really going for it. And another thing I've heard in what we may label now degenerate time. So many of the religions on the planet talk about this period now as being kind of a degenerate time. And sometimes it kind of looks that way, even though there's a lot of glorious things on the planet. But I think some of the symptoms are we get lazier, we're more distracted. I've heard a lot of great excuses why people can't make a certain class or do a certain meditation, and the excuses are more and more sophisticated now, right? So I think these are just signs and like that, but they do say for those of you really going for it, meaning enlightenment or your path, advancing your path, it's like shooting through the eye of a needle, sewing needle. So there is a space. It's very, very small, but you can do it. You can do it. So, and it is exciting because everything is available online right now. There's many, many incredible teachings online, and Buddhism's really exploded out over the past 30 years, as you know, where empowerments come to your neighborhood, and this qualified Lama was doing tour, and some of that may resume following the pandemic, if there is a following, or at least as things become a bit safer and healthier on the planet, that some of that may resume. So we're very fortunate where we're not having to necessarily go to India or Tibet, where it's very difficult to travel and to try to get one line of the Dharma, which was like the ancient days. And they would come and offer their most precious jewel to get one teaching like that. Now we have everything and we don't even want it. We're kind of like, yeah, I've had that. I hear people say, oh, what's the Lama teaching on? Lam Rim. Oh, I've already had that. Yeah. So do you have a realization of it? So this is just kind of our track. So let's go back to Yidam, heart bound, binding your heart mind, because in Tibetan Buddhism, the mind in its most subtle experience is actually located in the center of a subtle energy system in your body, which is in the center of the energy center at your heart, not the organ, the heart, in the space of your core, in the center of that heart chakra. Chakra means wheel. Most subtle experience of your mind is located there. So the heart mind is together. Let's be bound to that innate wisdom of non-duality, Dharmakaya, as much as we can. And so, and here's the other thing, dukkha, suffering, Sanskrit word for suffering. Okay, literally it means contracted space, contracted space. Sukha means bliss, Sanskrit word for bliss, which is really open spaciousness, open spaciousness. So in your own self-compassion, let's keep dukkha and sukha in the back of our mind. When you notice suffering arise, which is contracted space, we've all been there, we will be there again. Some of us are there right in this moment, okay? Can I find the open spaciousness Okay. And for those of you with more advanced practices, bound to the innate wisdom of non-duality. Look at our planet right now. There's many us's and them's, fragmentation. You know, we've seen this grow over the last few years, unfortunately. So we don't need to sign up and participate in that just because other people are. So the more we meditate on emptiness and understand how to do that properly, and can take teachings on emptiness, and to gain a good intellectual understanding of emptiness, to use that in our meditations more and more, to work to cut that duality. So the more you are participating, even in everyday life, with your work colleagues, your neighbors, your community, your partner, Lama Yeshe Ling, whatever it is, all the work we're doing on the planet is when that breakdown happens and somebody starts talking about someone else in a negative way, making a distinction, they are them, they are other. Can you keep your mind in more, that's your that's the real self-compassion. Can I keep my mind remembering the non-duality and remembering that all of us lack that concrete inherent otherness, concrete inherent enemy like that. It simply doesn't exist. It's a habit due to ignorance in the mind. That's all. I want to go on and I want to quote something from Stephen Batchelor right now. The underlying disposition of ego grasping is a flight reaction from the essential spacious nature of our being. Anxiety is the fundamental emotional tone of the existential uncertainty, okay, intrinsic to grasping at identity. This existential anxiety is bound up with our struggle to cope with the essentially empty nature of the ego. Okay, it leads us to grasp at anything that will reinforce a sense of self. We grasp at pleasurable things that substantiate our existence, and we fight defensively of anything that threatens us. Okay, so we may try to deny and anesthetize, you know, all the other things we do is we try to deny, we anesthetize ourselves from the pain, okay? And there's three fundamental dispositions of this pain is attachment, aversion, and ignorance, as you know, the three poisons, attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And so inevitably, however, the transitory nature of our materiality, okay, our mortality will always haunt us, okay, and may eventually lead us to face the basic anxiety of this grasping at the self. So just some things to think about that I found interesting too, of reminding ourselves what's the best way to help us like that. And let me go back now to some more realistic, practical approaches. But keep that in mind. And if you don't know what emptiness is, if you don't know what I'm talking about with non-duality, no worries. Slowly, you start engaging, reading some of the simpler texts on emptiness or those sections of simpler Lam Rim books to get this idea of disengaging and dismantling this independent, solid self that we think exists, that gets us into all of our trouble. Like that causes a lack of self-compassion towards ourselves. So going back to some practical things, I want to talk about changing the critical self-talk. Real practical thing. How do I change that critical self-talk? Now, we've already worked with self-compassion exercise using mindfulness, shared humanity or common humanity, and loving kindness towards yourself or self-kindness. So great, nice self-exercise, identifying those three components, and using the mindfulness I mentioned again of just, you know, looking at what is happening for me right now. What's going on? What's the feeling I'm having? What do I really feel that I need? You know, looking at things like this of We're just getting realistic of having a look at the mind, this non-physical, spacious, luminous experience that has two characteristics in Tibetan Buddhism. Two characteristics, as we know. The mind is clear and knowing. That's it, according to Tibetan Buddhism. For some of you that are newer, that's a radical shift, that the mind has an aspect of clarity and it has an aspect of awareness, because our minds normally do not feel clear. They feel busy and fraught. Okay. So one wonderful self-compassion tool right there to counter delusion, because part of this class was how do I deal with negative mind states as they turn up. To counter delusion is remind yourself of the real nature of your mind. It's not busyness. It's not laziness, it's not forgetfulness, it's not fear, it's not anxiety. It's not hatred or attachment or pride or jealousy. Those are simply habits in the mind due to fundamental misknowing, ignorance, confusion. And I might have a lot of those habits in my mind. Many of us do. So again, with my mindfulness, can I say, well, there's the hatred coming up, there's the anger. Okay. So the beginning is awareness, using the awareness aspect as well through mindfulness practice. But when I can become aware of that more than immediately having the negative response, okay, you slowly start to turn the mind, slowly. So the beginning is, we were used to, when we were kids in the sandbox, kids sometimes would punch out and hit another kid, so they couldn't control their body. Now as adults, we can pretty much control the body as far as we're not going to hit somebody. Then the next thing that happens is a speech. This still opens, the mouth still opens. And you get angry and then a nasty remark comes out, uncontrolled. Many times it happens for people, okay? Then you get all down on yourself. Well, that was really horrible. Why did I do it? Okay, we're working on controlling it, okay? So slowly, and I started to do this, as I said, with humor as well. I still use it. I'm a nun, but I still get irritated. I'm not a wholly perfect being by any means, okay? So what I'll notice now, you might be going to a meeting. Let's think about it. Maybe attending a meeting. And you know there's going to be a difficult person at the meeting, even if it's a Zoom call. And you know the challenges, and you're fighting over budgets, or you're dealing with a project, or they're always interfering with what you're doing at work. You know, so you know they're going to be at the meeting, and you're a little bit set up on edge. You're nervous, you're agitated, you're going to show them. So what if we just start the deep breathing right there before the meeting? Okay, I know they're going to be there. So here's a Lojong idea I want to bring in. Lojong is mind training, transforming problems, basically. Okay, so because I know they're going to be there, frankly, what Lojong says and what Tibetan Buddhism says is we need difficult people in our life, as unpleasant as that may be, because they show us our minds. They show you the work you need to do. When everybody's easy and it's all our friends around us, it's easy. They like us, they agree with us, they help us, they do what we want to do, we do what they want to do. It's all easy and smooth. Okay. Dukkha also, suffering, constriction, is also on one level, literally bumpy axle. It's a bumpy ride. So I'm going to come into this meeting. I might say, because that person's there, it's going to be bumpy. I don't like them, whatever. Okay. I've got my deep breaths going, which is just an automatic, get that going in your life. Deeper respiration is hugely helpful in calming your mind down, for one. You can do it right on the screen. Nobody knows you're doing it. 3 deep breaths. There they are. There's a little block pops up. Okay. Can you think for a moment to stretch? How wonderful. I need this person. I need this person. This is the work I need to do. We still need to purify. My mind's not completely clear and Buddha-like yet. If that's how you feel, this is the person you need to do the work. They're the most precious person actually on this call. So there's ways we start bringing that in over and over. I really need this person. Let me wake up and take notice of, and what I can do outside of the call, which is why we need a meditation practice. Back on my cushion, I need to peel back some layers of what they're showing me about my mind. why they are more difficult than other people. What is it about them? And you start asking yourself on your meditation cushion, do I ever do the things that they do? Because sometimes they're a mirror for our own activity. I have a motivation in my interaction with them. I need this thing on my budget that they disagree, whatever you can say. Well, what's their motivation? Did I ever consider that in my interaction with them? Rarely. Is there any common thread in our motivations? And here's one common thread for all beings on the planet you can consider. Just as I want to be happy and don't want to suffer, they want to be happy and they don't want to suffer. We really have that in common. Even though they may go about getting their happiness in a different way from me, but fundamentally, we want the same thing. Fundamentally, second thing in common, we both have Buddha nature. We both have a seed and a potential that can ripen into a fully realized being. Suddenly you start seeing a whole person there, not just the jerk at work, right? But then you want to keep layering, and part of this is on your cushion and part of it is when you're back in front of them. What's it like to be them looking through their eyes back at you? What's it like to work with you? Easy, spacious? Are they not nervous as well? That you might not like them? Our self-cherishing doesn't allow us to think about that. It's only about us and our experience. So these are ways we work on the cushion, off the cushion, back with them, and back and forth you do that dance. That's our work to make harmony on the planet. We have to do it with that other, especially that difficult, challenging person. So one thing I'll do is if I'm in front of them and I notice irritation arising in my mind and they just said that trigger that they always say, they push that button, okay? And what I do now is I'll just notice bubbles of irritation coming in my mind, not anything major heavy. I'm just like, yeah, I know that that often happens around this person, right? So what I do now with humor, if I see the person walking toward me and I'll notice bubbles of irritation or annoyance or frustration, because those are all lesser degrees of anger, let's say, is I'll notice, and there's a little voice in the back of my head that possibly still with a smile on my face, I may say in the back of my head, Amy, don't open your mouth right now. So you can layer the little, knowing that it's a little trigger for me. You might say something rude, so I can still keep a smile on my face, and maybe I'll catch up genuinely to the smile where I get the Lojong teaching and say, wow, I'm so glad they're here because now I'm really going to be able to see my mind. But then in that space, remind yourself, big antidote, remind yourself of the real nature of your mind. It's clear and it's aware. It's really the true nature of my mind. If I feel flutters of anxiety and fear rising up, that's not my real mind. That's simply delusional habit that I can get rid of in my mind permanently. But right now I have some habits of that. That's all. If I notice fear, loathing, attachment, I can notice and say, nature of my mind is clear and knowing, clear, spacious luminosity. Like that. Are we communicating? Okay, so let me go back now for a moment. That's one main antidote is remember the nature of your mind. Okay, changing your critical self-talk. And this takes time. This is weeks of practice. Okay, but again, you try your best. You can keep a journal. You can write stuff down, kind of like a blueprint. Okay, for how to change myself for the long run, like that. Okay, and if you like and you're home alone or you at times, you can say some of this stuff out loud to yourself if that's more effective for you. If not, put it in a journal, write things down, put things in your computer, whatever you feel comfortable. Record things on your phone and you can play that recording later, how were you feeling? Okay, here's the first step. Changing the way you treat yourself, okay? Awareness again, that word comes up, okay? Notice when you're being self-critical. Notice when you're being self-critical. It's a big step. Some people are not even aware. We've been through those recordings so many times you don't even know when you're layering worthlessness on yourself. Where underneath you're going, I can't do anything right. I can't do anything right. I always muck up around this person. I always misstep around this person. So just let's first notice it. This is back in your practice. You write down in a journal, you say it out loud, like that. Okay, so whenever you're feeling bad about something, this is the step, and you say something, think about what you just said. Notice the words that go out, you know. You can kind of just see them out there, and they solidify sometimes. Just first of all, first step is just notice when you're having a situation, you're struggling, okay? Think about what you've just said to yourself and try to be as accurate as possible. This is about noting the inner speech that's happening. Okay, noting it verbatim. What did you just say? Write it down. Write it down, have a look at it. I know it's a little scary at first for some people, okay? But it's okay, they're just words on a page. I know words have power, and we're gonna change that. You can change it into something more positive. So notice, first of all, what are the words that you actually use when you're self-critical? Are there key phrases that come up again and again and again? What's the tone? What's the tone of your voice? Is it harsh? Is it cold? Is it angry? Do you use a lot of curse words? Okay. This isn't a judgment on any of it. You are simply observing right now. Think about mindfulness, that first major component. I'm simply observing. This is me getting to know myself. Okay. Here's another layer. Does the voice remind you of anyone in your past who is critical of you? So you want to be able to get to know this inner self-critic really, really well, okay? You want to be aware, okay, when that inner judge is active. Because then we're gonna start changing. Now, here's the thing. One example, okay. You've just eaten the pint of Haagen-Dazs. Okay, we've all been there, right? Just eaten the pint of ice cream. You might have an inner voice that says, you're a pig. You are revolting. You make me sick, okay? So really try to get a clear sense of what are those words, what's that talk? How's that talk go? Everybody with me? Okay. Number 2, make an active effort to soften the self-critical voice, okay? But again, more with compassion rather than judgment. Okay, so rather than like, I just ate the pint of ice cream, and then I'm like, you're such a pig. Okay, so rather than softening, you know, how about, I mean, rather than this self-critical voice, and I'm gonna just judge it and say, well, that's not good to say, I shouldn't say that. There's no should here. It's like this. Now here's something softer. I know you were really stressed today. And I know that one of your coping mechanisms is to reach for food when you're stressed and you feel unsafe right now. But this is causing me unnecessary pain. So why not let my inner compassionate self say a few words now? And you put that into your own words, but you see what I mean? I'm not going to be like, oh, now you said you're a pig. Well, that's stupid. You know, laying another judgment. I shouldn't say I'm a pig. I shouldn't say I'm disgusting. But it's more like, you know, I know you're in tremendous pain right now, and you don't really know how to sort that. You haven't found any type of therapy that can sort it. So that's really, really scary. But layering those words is only going to harm us worse. So let's find, I've got an inner compassionate being. We all do. Let's let that speak. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3, can you reframe the observations made by the inner critic, okay, in a friendly, positive way? And it might take time to find the right words to use, okay? And you might go into, what would a compassionate friend say to you? You call a friend, you said, this is happening to me and I just ate, and then as a result, I just ate the pint of ice cream. What would they say to you? But you want to use something with warmth and care and, you know, not overly schmaltzy, okay, if you know that word. Something that's realistic, some terms of genuine endearment that you can find. So, and it can be, you know, something about, okay, I know you ate the ice cream because I know you're feeling really, really sad right now, really confused. And you thought that might be the answer, or I know it's just a habit from what you've done before. Okay. Now you feel worse. Now you're not feeling good about your body. I really want you to be happy. Well, why don't you go out for a walk now? Even 10 minutes. So this is like supportive self-talk. You could add hand to your heart a little bit, or just kind of rubbing my arms if that works for you. You know, some people like to massage their head. That might be a nice, just, you know, that feels pretty good for some people. Physical gestures of warmth. We talked a bit about touch before, okay? It can sometimes tap into this caregiving system. Okay? And we need that for ourselves. Okay? So that releases, in a sense, oxytocin, they say. That's something, you know, very positive for the body to release. It makes us feel good. Okay. But the important thing is to start acting kindly, feeling genuine warmth and caring. That's going to follow when we really start acting kindly, changing that inner self-talk. But it's not going to happen overnight. So then, you know, you might have gotten really good at it right now, and then the next day you're back to the cursing and yelling at yourself. And so you look at it again. As most of you know who've been at this for a while, this path for a while, is that this is a process that takes time, and we're very impatient, as I said before, with it. So we're slowly working at this process. For me, my process over what David was saying, 30 some years, is every day is begin again. Every day, honestly, every day my mind is different, but it's still my mind. There's some consistency there of me knowing my mind and showing up, but every day it's different. And I remember when I worked at Vajrapani Center in California for many years, and I was the director. And so the staff would, when I would come into the main building to work, there was a sense of, well, what kind of mood is she in today? The director, like, especially if the housekeeper wanted to order a new vacuum, they wanted to catch me in a good mood, right? And if somebody, you know, and people just, all of us were bumping up against each other. So we wanted to kind of know, but the director carried a little bit more weight. So some days, you know, it was a lot to run, and some days it wasn't, it didn't go well for me. And I would come in and I'd be kind of down, and I could see, and I'd see people very sweetly say, oh, what's wrong? You know, they really cared, what's wrong? You know, and I'd say, I don't know, it's just a lot to hold, and I was feeling overwhelmed. And sometimes I didn't have a word for it. So they would try to fix it. They'd be like, oh, well, maybe you need to do this, and maybe, and then sometimes I'd say to them, you know, it's okay, it's just how it is today, but tomorrow will be different. And it usually was. You know, those passages never lasted that long for me, but they pop up at times. It's normal. I just get that. Last week I had a couple rough days, you know, working with the center, and I didn't feel like it was going that well. And then the next day it went much better. So I always leave that door open, that possibility. But knowing, because of samsara, there's going to be challenges. That's okay. That's how it is. That's life. Right? So I always feel like it's a new, you know, begin again. And here I am, and oh, that same thing is happening. So let me go back to what is the critical, like, oh, look, I'm having some negative critical talk to myself. Well, yeah, I do that. What am I saying? What's the tone I'm saying it in? What could be, let me make an active effort right now to find a softer way to say that to myself, you know? And what can I reframe now about what I'm observing in a friendly, positive way? So I'm layering self-compassion on, layering the self-compassion on. And some people keep a journal, if that's helpful for you. Some people keep a journal, daily self-compassion journal. It would be interesting even just to keep something going for 1 week if you're not much of a journaler, okay? It can be an effective method to express emotions, okay? And it's been known to enhance mental and physical well-being, okay? So some people have done this for years and I really like to assess. Every morning I have practice, set a motivation. Throughout the day, I might have more time to practice. Sometimes not, because I'm engaged in a whole bunch of work, things like that. But in the evening, I come back to my practice. There's some point I'm coming back. And when I do come back, the first thing I do is kind of assess 1 or 2 minutes. How did it go today? You know, and it could just be as I'm seated, sitting down, deepening my breath, letting go, really with physical respiration of just, and slowly as you get on your cushion or your chair, wherever you, please make a space for that. It's really helpful. But as I'm winding down into that space, already the internal mechanism is like assessing. So, today was, and I might be like, today was a really hard day. Or today was so fun working with all these creative people and how to help the center. And it just seemed, everybody had great ideas. Like that was pretty uplifting. But whatever it is, and I'm just assessing slowly, and you might jot some notes. That didn't go very well. And in fact, I kind of responded in a really negative way, like that, okay? I'm not gonna get angry with myself. You know, I'm just gonna make a few notes. I feel bad about that. I might even make mental notes to say, I'm gonna focus my Vajrasattva practice on that particular activity I did today. That's a purification practice if you don't know. Vajrasattva, great purification practice to do at the end of every day once you learn how to do it. So again, if I made a rude comment to someone or something, or you storm off after a meeting, angry, you know, and then you felt kind of embarrassed, ashamed, humiliated, depressed or something, I'm going to go back and use my mindfulness. I'm going to use a sense of common humanity and kindness to deal with it. So, and here's what would happen. Bring my mindfulness to it. I'm assessing now at the end of the day. So I'm going to notice that, you know, because of something they mentioned, and I'm just using the center as an example, because they mentioned this thing at the center, and it brought up kind of an unsafe experience for me at another center. So that painful emotion got activated, right? And because I didn't have any place to go with that, then you lash out over that. I'm just giving an example. This didn't actually happen. Okay. And I might say, well, you know, I was really angry at her. She didn't really listen and understand. It has never been in that situation. Okay. So just my mindfulness, where I'm trying to accept and be non-judgmental about my experience of where it came from. I'm not over embellishing it and I'm not ignoring it. I'm kind of saying, yeah, that's where that was coming from. I'm not fixing it right there. I'm just observing. Okay. Then my common humanity, dealing with it. You know, let's say you overreacted. Well, here comes common humanity. Everybody overreacts sometimes. It's human. Everybody feels backed into a corner and often erupts like that. Sometimes that's just people's manner. That's what they were reinforced growing up. That's how their home life was. Okay. Some people fold in on themselves. Well, that's how they were trained to do it because their mother always did it like that. So again, common humanity, realizing so many other people are in this situation like that. No, just noting that. Number 3, self-kindness, loving kindness towards myself. So can I think of in my mind or write down some kind, understanding words of comfort? I'm letting myself know, I'm giving myself permission to care about myself in this situation right now, which can include adopting a gentle, reassuring tone. And here's the thing, it's okay. You know, you messed up. It wasn't the end of the world. And you can also say to yourself, I understand how frustrating this is, right? No wonder you lost it, okay? So here's the thing with self-kindness. So maybe the next time I'm at the meeting with these people, maybe I just need to bring in a little extra patience. Maybe I need to bring in a little bit more generosity of spirit for myself and others, like that. You're dealing with maybe chronic pain that makes you lash out, you know, maybe this is the best I can do right now. How wonderful that I might have a somewhat decent care team, not perfect, because nothing's perfect in samsara, somewhat decent care team that's helping me manage that on a physical level, and I'm doing the best I can. Sometimes I'm going to blow it, but I'm working on it. So that can be, I find a few more things I just wanted to say, and then I want to get into dealing with some of the delusions and take any questions. Can you use, and you're identifying also what we really want, which to be more balanced, spacious, coming from a really positive place, okay? So can you think about ways that you use self-criticism as a motivator? So if you think that being hard on yourself will help you change, okay? So, but why don't you first try to get in touch with the emotional pain that the self-criticism causes, and giving yourself compassion for that experience of being so judged. So that's a way I can use self-criticism as a motivator. You know, if there's a personal trait you're criticizing, you're lazy, you're impulsive, you're a rageaholic or something, and you say it and you think, because if I think by being hard on myself, I'm going to change. So let me go underneath that behavior, that activity, and let me get in touch with what's underneath that pain. What's underneath that? What is the emotional pain that the self-criticism causes? Giving myself space. Space is compassion in some ways, that I need to judge myself so much. You know, just noting that, seeing if you can use it in that way. And then see if another level, again, this is all similar, the same things we're talking about. See if you can think of a kinder, more caring way to motivate yourself instead. Because self-criticism isn't often a great motivator. So is there a kinder, more caring way to make the change? If I want to stop being a rageaholic, let's say, I want to stop flying off the handle. What language, for instance, would a wise, nurturing friend, would they use to point out that, you know, when you speak like that, it kind of drives me away, makes me scared, right? So aren't you driving yourself away? In a way, you're not happy in that space. So what what does your friend like to do to make it kinder, more caring, like that? And one example here, I'll just use, and I'm picking on one person I'm not going to name, but we talked last week. I'm really happy to listen to what's going on. Are you listening to yourself too sometimes? Meaning listen to the fear, listen to, you know, and that may be playing loudly in your head. But that's okay to really make yourself heard, which maybe you didn't feel heard for a long time in your life, which is why you would speak up, you know, loudly, things like that. And here's part of this is ask yourself, in general, everybody, what is the most supportive message you can think of that's in line with your underlying wish to be happy and healthy. Again, what is your most supportive message you can think of that is in line with your underlying wish to be happy and healthy? You may not have that answer right now. Jot that down, let that evolve. Let that evolve. Because we want to start moving into those messages. And it takes time again, slowly. So here's a third component of this, of what you really need, asking yourself what you really need. Every time you catch yourself being judgmental about your unwanted trait in the future, whatever it is you do, that whatever negative criticism, self-criticism, every time you catch yourself going into judgment about this trait, okay, first notice the pain of your self-judgment and give yourself compassion. As soon as you start the judgment, just notice that pain. Take a deep breath and think, I'm good enough. I'm giving it my best shot right now. This is the best I get right now. Sometimes it's like that. That's okay. Just inserting a pause to breathe and think about, this is the best I can show up right now. And then right after that, try to reframe that inner dialogue, that self-judgment, the self-criticism, so it's more encouraging and supportive. So here's the key. All of you know this. If you really want to motivate yourself, love is so much more powerful than fear. Love is really the answer for everything, but we get really separated from it. Really, really separated from it. So we do the best we can. We do the best we can. But think about that. Like, those words, the other words we're using, the other negative chatter, I don't want to send that to myself. I certainly don't want to send that out into the world. What might be a loving counter to that? How can I love myself in this moment when I'm really criticizing myself? Where's the love in there? I know I'm going to find it. It is there. It's our core, actually. It's our core. We just have many veils covering over it. That's all, based on delusion. So thank you. I know Lama Yeshe Ling's been posting things in the chat. Very kind. Just if you don't mention, sometimes people don't look at the chat. So there's a good starter for understanding emptiness, how to see yourself as you really are. It's a really helpful book. I've read it. His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I would recommend that. If you're a little bit along in that, I would highly recommend, many of you have read this, I'm sure, from Geshe Jompa Tekchog, Insight into Emptiness. It's fantastic. But this nice starter, how to see yourself as you really are, is in the chat. The Lama Yeshe Ling calendar is there. And thank you so much about the offerings, because it is challenging for a Buddhist nun on her own. So I am grateful. We don't get a lot of support. So I'm super grateful for your help. Thank you
You
so
weren't meant
much.
to see that one.
What's that?
I wasn't thinking you would see that one. But anyway, yeah, thanks.
It went to everyone. So, but thank you. But that's a way that people don't realize they can. And what's been interesting, this is really, centers have asked me this. It's a little awkward being the teacher, but so when we were in person, as you know, the centers are very kind and they make offerings, but clearly not enough to support yourself. But students would come up individually and they'd have envelopes and you could make an individual offering. And then we went online, and in the beginning, none of that happened because there weren't ways to. So then centers started to realize, and I think some teachers spoke up and said, so they started to organize. So that's very sweet, and it's very helpful, and it's very kind, and I so appreciate. So I want to turn and talk to now the transforming some negative emotions in our lives as well. And they have to be layered on with self-compassion. I like to use kind of more Buddhist principles with self-compassion together. The Tibetan tradition, originally from Tibetans, they have a very different wiring than how Westerners learn. Not one is good or bad. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying different way that, and my Sherpa friends, my Tibetan friends, it's very different lifestyles and situations. And one of the things I found so interesting is, some of you may have noticed this yourself, so I'm very close with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, has cousins that live in Queens, New York. Sherpa family, very, very good family. The parents are very serious practitioners. They have 4 children. One was a monk at Kopan for many years. He's now an Uber driver in New York, but there's 4 kids, they're wonderful kids. They're grown now. I think the youngest has just finished university. And I visit them. When I was on the East Coast, I visited them regularly. They're very dear friends. And I noticed in my visits, and when the kids finally came over, I wrote their initial visa letter to get the parents into the country. The kids eventually were able to come over. The parents worked so hard to support them and get them educated. And I was fascinated how on Saturday night, when the kids were teenagers, how the kids liked hanging out with their parents. I don't know how many teenagers you know on a Saturday night that want to stay home and hang out with the parents. They often went with the parents on outings regularly. It was a big focus. Some of the kids would have friends over, and sometimes we were over at another friend's house. But there's a huge family network, but relatively healthy. I'm not saying they're perfect by any means, these families, but the kids I noticed have very little negative attitude towards their parents. So a question I have is, some of you have children, some of you have been around children, and how's that in our cultures? Kids don't have attitude when they're teenagers? What do you notice? Because I know growing up for myself, and this is years ago as a teenager, my friends and myself, we had a lot of attitude towards our elders that was mouthed off, and some, really rude experiences. And I've noticed this with a lot of my niece and nephews, their friends, their attitudes, friends, many friends' kids. But I was fascinated with these Sherpa families. And I would ask them, but one of the things I noticed was the Sherpa families, and this is also in Thupten Jinpa's book, I'm going to forget the name, about compassion. Do you remember The Heart of Compassion, is it?
Fearless Heart, I think it is.
Fearless
Heart?
A Fearless Heart, thank you. It's a beautiful book, definitely read. A Fearless Heart about compassion. He's amazing. Thupten Jinpa is His Holiness the Dalai Lama's interpreter when His Holiness teaches in the West. And he's a teacher himself at McGill, professor at McGill. He wrote A Fearless Heart. And one of the passages that struck me the most was when he was growing up, his parents just simply valued him for being alive. That was good enough for them. So a lot of us growing up, there's been competitiveness. Your parents are like, if you get into that club, then that's great. And you need to be on the sports team, and you need to get an A on this test. And well, she got an A, how come you didn't get an A? And he does this, and how come you don't do that? And so I don't know if you grew up in families like that, but there was a lot of conditions. You knew the love was there, but there wasn't just simply that value. And I could see that in the Sherpa home, that, one son didn't want to be a monk anymore. So there might have been a little disappointment, but one time we were talking about it, that he's an Uber driver, and the parents were like, yeah, they're happy. They're like, that's what he wants to do. That's what makes him happy. So, are you going to argue with that? You want your kids to be happy, right? He's a really good person. He's such a sweetheart, this person. He's always there when the Lamas arrived. He was the one who picked them up. He knew how to treat them, helped the family with everything, gives his money to the family. Like, what are you going to say? Is there a problem with that? But the parents would have expectations. Then they layer that on the kids. The kids don't feel like they can meet the expectations. They feel fearful, they feel hurt, they feel scared, so they act out in all kinds of ways. Okay, so we just notice this. Okay, so what we want to, so then we have delusions in the mind. We need to counter them. So we try our best. So I like the Tibetan Buddhist approach of looking at the mind and how the mind really exists, and then working with some self-compassion techniques that we so much need to as Westerners. So one of the first things I mentioned is, let's go back to the first antidote of general ways of dealing with negative emotions is remembering the nature of the mind. Okay, the mind is clear, non-physical, a stream of mental events that rise and pass away. And those mental events, those thoughts, emotions are impermanent. They appear, they disappear, come and go like clouds in the sky. They're not fixed entities. You have a negative thought about yourself this moment. Next moment, it's not. It's not going to, it doesn't have to stay there. It's not permanent. Okay. So if we see those thoughts and experiences, especially the heavy ones like clouds in the sky, I sometimes got into a mode of they're like water bubbles. Bubbles, light. But what's the essence of a bubble? There's nothing there. You try to touch it, it pops. You could pop the bubbles if you like. You have a bunch of negative ones. I visualized myself once, some meditations, popping them. Okay, but what happens is rumination and self-absorption and self-cherishing layer and put a coating around the bubble and now make it solid. See it as solid. It's not solid, it's a mistake. Okay, we layer it, we make it solid. I concretize it. I've now gold-plated it. And now this is who I am. I'm a negative, terrible person. It's just not true. It's just not true. Can you see them like dreams, like rainbows, waves that rise and fall in the sea? Okay. It doesn't mean I'm not going to deal with them. I do need to deal with them. Okay. I want to deal with them in a realistic manner, in a useful, positive, beneficial way. Okay. And here's another thing. Can you de-identify with the emotion as well? So our mindfulness will ask us to look at it, feel it, be there with it. And on another level, part of the deconcretization, de-identify. So instead of saying I'm an angry person, you know, I've known people said I'm a rageaholic, they'd say, right? Really? Well, no, sometimes you just have a lot of anger in your mind. For me, it's much lighter. Sometimes you just have a lot of anger in your mind. Right? So that's what you want to work on. Identify your biggest delusion first and go after that, applying the right antidotes and things. Okay. So I found that helpful. Yeah, she's just got a lot of concern and anxiety in her mind. She's not really, you know, terribly anxious person. She might manifest like that sometimes, but it's just because she has more anxiety in her mind than attachment or fear, or sorry, attachment or hatred. That we all have stuff we're working with. Again, I'm going to layer, here's another general antidote, mindfulness or self-awareness. You're watching what's going on in there in a more calm, spacious manner before I react. So we've talked about that. Here's another one we've also talked about, being non-judgmental. I notice certain thoughts come through and I'm really heavily judgmental. I shouldn't think that. I'm a nun, I shouldn't ever be angry. It doesn't really help. Again, it makes constriction, dukkha, suffering. If I kind of watch it and go, wow, it's a lot of anger. Our mind is clear, like the sky. There's meditations like that on the clarity of consciousness. But you know, in the sky, clouds appear sometimes. There's weather. Sometimes you just have light, puffy clouds. You know, that's like an idea. I'm going to brush my teeth. Light, little, nothing. They change, they pass on, done. Sometimes you get a whole bank of rain clouds has now obscured the clear blue sky. So I know the sky's back there, but I don't see it. And what instead is in my mind is full-blown anger, full-blown attachment, full-blown confusion, jealousy, obsession, like that, right? And that's what I focus on. Make it heavier. Okay. That's not the truth of it. So if I can just be non-judgmental and say, wow, today, really, really cloudy. Okay. Sometimes the best it's going to be today. It was me coming to the Vajrapani building and being like, yeah, I'm not all that happy today. Okay, well, just how it is today. It's changeable. It will change. So not being so overly judgmental with it. can I cultivate instead a sense of equanimity, this non-judgmental, loving awareness and acceptance of whatever arises, and continue to work on it, and continue to work on it. Let's go to some specific antidotes for you. So let me just ask questions right now. Questions, or give me one of your big delusions you want to work on. You're suffering from hatred, fear, guilt, attachment, you name it, jealousy, pride.
This isn't a classic one, but it's a sense of not, and I wouldn't call it esteem, but it's a sense of not valuing my being.
Not valuing your being.
Yeah. And that leads to a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and again, this is pretty common for noting, and I would just start with some awareness. And what we do in Buddhism is we analyze. We're analyzing. It's very much asks you to do that, to get to deeper levels of, so if you're looking at not valuing yourself, I think is what you said, right?
Yep.
Yeah, not valuing. So one of the things is, let's look at the words you might use for that. The first thing I would do is you start looking at the words that you're first using. And I would also notice environmentally, when do those recordings come up for you? When do you find most you're not valuing yourself? Is there a particular activity you're doing?
Performance.
Is it personal life, work life, with certain people? Those are the kind of things you'd want to identify. Sorry, what were you saying?
I just not performing to my standards.
Not performing to your standard. Okay, so let's look at, do you think you're really not performing to your standard?
Got high standards.
So you have very high standards. Are the high standards realistic?
Not at the moment.
And I'll put it this way. So there's a number of us that are students of His Holiness the Dalai Lama or Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So I'm going to ask all of you that are students like that. Pretty amazing examples to have of beings on the planet. Okay. Is your mind like their mind? Mine is not. I'll put it this way. Mine is not. Okay. Now, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, as some of you know, is a pretty extraordinary person with the types of things he asks us to do, whether it is doing pujas all day long, which are practices, prayer ceremonies, right, that are layered onto your own individual practice, when you might be serving a center full time, with another full-time job, and with a family, and with a health issue, right? Isn't this the Lama Zopa Rinpoche style, right? And what happens is Rinpoche is giving you options of ways to manifest and practice, okay? Our job is to try to find our path through that. Rinpoche just gives you all the different options that are possible. What we then say, because we don't have enough wisdom, is, so I need to be that, okay? And then for years, I tried to be that, right? But I don't have that level of mind yet. So then I couldn't attain that, and then I would beat myself up, and I could never attain. So what I needed to do, and I think Rinpoche wants us to do this, is start developing our wisdom, okay, and compassion. Because wisdom and compassion are the two wings of the bird, they say, that we need to fly to enlightenment. You need the right view, which is your wisdom, and you need Bodhichitta, the ultimate view of compassion, that incredible good heart. Okay. So Dave, what I wonder is, can you find a realistic view of what is realistic, what is realistic way for you to perform? And what is a realistic bar that is still going to make you feel good that you're doing?
I think it's getting to this comment made by Thubten Jinpa that his sense of a value as a person had nothing to do with his capacity to perform in this way or that way. And so I don't remember this most of the time, but if I could just say, Dave, you have value. You don't have to perform to any standard at all. You have value, and so because you have value, you're worth looking after wisely. I know if I value myself, I'd look after myself better than I do.
That's beautiful right there, what you just said. So you need to write that down, and then you need to put it on the bathroom mirror in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
And you need to, but I'm not kidding. You need to, if you're coming from a space like that, and many of us are, you really honestly need to sit with that every day. I have value. This is basic. I have value. Okay. And you can go back, and this is what happens. We go back to the Lam Rim and say, this is our philosophy. Oh, precious human rebirth. Like we've heard the recordings, and what happens after a while, it's not penetrating. So put it into your own words. I have value. Because we say, well, you have a precious human rebirth. You got a human life optimum, and then you met the Dharma. Oh, that's fantastic. But all that, we're not hearing that anymore. Let's just go back to the fundamentals. Because first of all, and I can start layering some things, but you organize this program right now. You've been with Lama Yeshe Ling for years. You teach for Lama Yeshe Ling. You're the spiritual program coordinator for, like, that alone is pretty extraordinary, let alone what you support in your home life, your being your own practice. Those are some pretty cool things, I think. But Dave has to feel those because you're already going like this. I see your head like, okay, so this is just an old recording for Dave, not being able to see the value. So that's the work right there, is whether you wake up and breathe every day. I'm okay. I'm a good person. I did that for years myself, where now I wake up with it naturally because I didn't feel that way for a long time. And what that did is it manifested in everything I did. Everything was tainted with, there's something wrong with me. There's something I'm not attaining, something that's not good enough. And then I would vomit that onto other people. And we don't want to be there. So I think it's a great point you're bringing up, great question of, and I think it relates to many of us, of just that fundamental, can we acknowledge I'm good enough? Now you might say, but I want to be a Buddha. Fair enough. But also in my manifestation on this path, I am good enough. I'm giving it my best shot. If you don't feel you're giving it your best shot, what can you realistically do to adjust? Make it practical. I'll give examples of some people in other courses that are on other topics, but they'll say, well, I don't have a meditation practice. I don't have time. I don't have time. This was a meditation course we were doing recently. They don't have time. How many times have you said this? You don't have time. Well, how much time do you spend surfing around the internet and on your devices with something wasteful? Right. And you might really evaluate. Some people evaluated, and some people were like, there was like 3 to 5 hours of that time. So what they did is they borrowed a half an hour from that time and moved it into their practice. And then they got a meditation practice going. You can borrow 15 minutes, shift it over, because what you're going to do is see the benefit. And that's going to give you your buoyant springboard. And you're going to go, I can do this. At 15 minutes, I can borrow another 15 minutes next month. Now I have a half an hour. Does that make sense? I know it takes effort. I know it takes effort. You can do it.
Familiarization. Yeah. When I
Yes,
get
Lori,
there,
it's okay to feel good and to feel value. Absolutely.
yeah, when
Yeah.
I get
I think
there,
people start to feel guilty. Sorry, David, I'll
Yeah.
let you go.
go ahead, please.
No, I just wanted to say, I think in terms of, when I work with people as well, or even myself, is sometimes we feel guilty to feel good, or we feel guilty if we feel worthy and value. And I think we got to get over that. It's okay. As a matter of fact, it's more than okay.
Right. And some of us were raised with a lot of guilt, that there needs to be guilt to be, I feel guilty, therefore I am. It's like, that's just a habit of what we learned from certain people, and is use the guilt as regret of something you messed up, then funnel it into practice. I'm going to do this better next time. I can do a little bit better with that. Sometimes I'll have a thing with somebody that really irritates me is, when you do the Vajrasattva practice and you come to the power of resolution, the fourth opponent power. So I'll resolve. You can't say I'll never get angry again. I'll never get irritated again. That's unlikely. But the first 5 minutes I'm with them the next time, I certainly can stave off irritation. And then I do it. And then that creates a new neural pathway. I've done it. I got a new pattern going. I just broke trail there. And I can do it again and again. Yeah. So Aruna's popped in as well. I'm so glad if it helps clarify, when we're concerned about asking the guru for advice. But again, this is the person that has the map to the treasure. So we'd like to get to the treasure. Sometimes that it's an arduous trek to get there that Rinpoche might send us on, but here's the way I think about it, Arunas, is I'd like to get to that work when I have a little bit more control of my mind and life right now, rather than when I'm dying, when I might have to do that work. And it could be more terrifying for me at that point, and where I have less control. So sometimes I think of Rinpoche only wants you to be happy and doesn't want to put you in a position that's going to make you miserable, because then we don't do the work that well. I just went through that process myself with my move to California and what I'm doing here. It's still clarifying. So I'm working with it. But again, here's another thing about asking the guru for advice is a wonderful thing, especially if you have a strong relationship with the teacher and you have faith in them, is to, you need to incorporate your own wisdom and compassion on your path. So, give them ideas of what you want to do. Don't just sit like, what should I do? You tell them what you want to do, that you've really thought about with a good motivation. This seems to be the best way for me to manifest. I had a list of many things that I thought were really beneficial things. Then I can discuss that with Rinpoche. Okay. And then one of those things came out best. Great. I'm excited. Then I follow that. And then I got another message. Okay. And I wasn't as happy with that message. Okay. But I looked at that, and somebody else was involved in that message, and we kind of discussed, and both of us kind of laughed and went like, we don't want to do that, And then we kind of let it sit for a week or two and really thought about our own wisdom and our own adult skills. We're not babies here, we're adults. So we were kind of thinking, okay, well, let's get creative. Like, since Rinpoche kind of suggested this, we want what's best. If some other people come into this role, that may not be as helpful. So maybe we can do it together. Maybe we can share some of this, and suddenly there's positive movement and help, and we're getting help. It's not just, so look at that, but we have to participate in that. And I've seen too many times where people in centers, you kind of give it up all for the guru, like, oh, what should I do? And that without taking like due diligence in perhaps selecting a director or an SPC, program coordinator, and then you just rely too much on the teacher without checking out the best people. And so centers and communities have their karma that gets involved in that. And sometimes it'll be like, why doesn't it come out great? It's because we didn't show up with the best, putting the best people in line and things like that. I've noticed that many times with centers. And so we have to meet with our wisdom and stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, for times when you do really need advice, where do you find the guru?
Okay, so basically you would be, is it Deanna? Yeah, Deanna, thank you. You might have been studying for a while in a certain tradition. It could be Lama Yeshe Ling. And maybe you've been online to watch certain teachers, like now online, which is a great way to do it. You may want to meet somebody first in person and go to their teachings live. I found that most helpful to really get a sense of them. In the pandemic, that's kind of impossible right now, unfortunately. But slowly over the course of study, then you'll meet various teachers. And we have teachers at different levels. Some are male, some are female, some are other, some are Tibetan, some are not, some are, some are ordained, some are lay. There's all kinds of different teachers, and you can ask different students about certain teachers. And then slowly you might, check up on a certain course a certain teacher's doing. And then slowly you could start to see if you can ask advice. Sometimes it's done over email, sometimes in person, or, on a Zoom call, something like that. Does that help?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so don't jump at the first, the first teacher you meet, this is their, and you need to check up yourself. And if you really have a guru-disciple relationship, it's a very distinctive relationship, and you want to take care of that relationship and make sure it's very clean, and that you're following their advice if you ask, and you're not asking and then not doing it. And you want to make sure you have a qualified teacher, not some false guru. There are some people out there that are not leading people in the right direction. So you want to take your time. His Holiness even says, what, takes 6 years, and be a spy on your guru. Like, really check the person up. Are they walking the talk? What are their disciples like? Things like that. Yeah.
How would you word it? How would you word asking your teacher? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I mean, here's the thing: if you are checking with a qualified guru, and I'm thinking of like a highly realized being.
Yeah.
You have a relationship with someone like that based on your going to their teachings for years and studying with them and watching their students and maybe being part of their organization or not. Maybe they don't have an organization. They're, but you've taken some time. These are the things you ask a teacher. This is what's most appropriate. You ask them for life practice questions, your spiritual practice mainly. And you don't give them a whole long 8-page letter. You basically kind of say, I've been doing this, I did this course, I'm interested in emptiness, I'm interested in doing prostrations, or, I'd like the best direction. You ask them serious health-related questions.
Yeah.
You can ask them. A third way is asking for major life issues, like, my husband got transferred to California, I'm considering a move. Is this what, our son is in school here. You might ask a question like that. Those are the best way. You don't ask your teacher about this partner or that partner, or what color car to buy, or, things like that.
Yeah.
You want to keep it at a loftier level. And if you do ask, you want to follow the advice as best as you can. If you cannot follow the advice, you can either say right there, if it's a meeting, one-on-one, this is really hard for me. I'm struggling. Or you can think about it for a while, write back on email and say, I don't think I'll be able to do that. Could I do this instead? Or could the teacher recommend, because I don't want to not follow the advice.
Yeah.
Those are kind of the best habits to get into, like that. And also, Dave, Deki Lee, anyone correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm saying something wrong. So Manoshi, Sharon, like that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure. I know we're out of time, so I just wanted to ask if we didn't get to the specific antidotes, but meditation on emptiness is the best overall antidote to gain a direct perception of emptiness. But I know that takes a great deal of effort, and it takes a lot of study and practice and a lot of merit. Along the way, what we can do is continue the self-kindness exercises to really consider when those negative recordings are getting going in our minds, and work our best based on some of the exercises that I gave you. And also continuing the Buddhist study, I think, is really, really helpful, so that you start to go into more specific class on transforming the mind, where you really get to the antidotes. One of the antidotes for anger is loving kindness. So again, it's Sharon Salzberg. Are you adding to all the negative self-speak? And I love you. And I have value. And I'm a good person. That needs to be added for all of us. Westerners have a hard time with that. I'm not asking you to be an egomaniac. I'm talking about a balanced view of yourself. We're all here conscientiously showing up. You're all good people with good hearts. Do you make mistakes sometimes? Absolutely. That's what human nature does. Can you learn how to be okay with that in your process to evolve more fully? Anything else? And I'm so sorry this is so short.
I had a question, if I might, Venerable.
Please.
I think the idea of having value speaks a lot, and Dave made reference to that, about self-compassion generally. And a new phenomenon for me that I think a lot of people encountered in the pandemic is this broad statement that if you're sick or you're old or you're disabled, that you have no value And in fact, you have so little value that you should hurry up and die and get out of the way of everyone else resuming their life. And so this kind of constant, when you encounter the external talk from others that reinforces the idea you don't have value. What are the thoughts about dealing with that when it comes from the outside, and is broader from a lot of people? That idea of you as a human don't have value. You're a junior associate, and you'll really be worthwhile when you're a VP. But that comes from all quarters, and that notion of that system of what makes value.
So I would ask you to consider, are you only able to focus on those voices around you? Are there not voices that see you? Because here's something, I see you and I hear you. And, I totally hear and see you, even though I cannot experience what you're experiencing. But the thing is, when we have a lot of negative self-talk, that mirrors back, and all I'm going to see are the people that want me out of the way, that don't value me because I'm in a wheelchair, that don't believe I have any pain in my body, that don't see, I've seen also with COVID patients I've known, people I know people that died of COVID, I'm sure many of you do, but I've heard such outpourings of compassion, prayer vigils, that people just so like, oh my gosh, and hearing about, oh my gosh, this person's in a wheelchair, this person can't walk now, this person has chronic pain. I mean, Sean Tanaka, the man I mentioned in New York with heart surgery, the outpourings of people wanting to help him. So I hear more of that. Now, I'm not somebody in a wheelchair, I'm not somebody super disabled, but what I hear is I also see that directed at people like that. I've witnessed it. That's a lot of what I see. So let's explore what other things like that are there in your frame, your scope of view that you're not paying attention to or seeing or not letting in because of perhaps a certain conditioning you've been used to that only has you seeing the negative thing, that you're not good enough. Again, I'm just questioning, I'm not sure.
No, that's a beautiful and excellent answer and speaks exactly to.
And the other thing I would ask about that is sometimes we do have a lot of negative things around us. So what I would slowly try to do when it's possible, which it's not always totally possible, is I've worked slowly, gently, not in rash ways, of shifting some of the negative people around me slowly to the sides and bringing in more of the positive, but in a gentle way. Like one example is a dear friend of mine from childhood who is just very critical and negative and judgmental. And as a result now in my life, I spend less and less time speaking to her. Initially, she was upset and she didn't understand and things. And I am there for her. I call her a few times a year. She never calls me, but I do make space, but it's less space than I would have had with the positive people around me that I really need to make sure I'm on the buoyant springboard. Right? Because it's hard on the buoyant springboard. Sometimes I've sprung too high and I'm scared. Sometimes I feel like the springboard's not under me. Sometimes I notice it's not that buoyant. So I need to keep people, we all do, we all need supportive people around us. And that's what's brilliant. And another thing I wanted to say about, because Laurie and Sharon are here, and Arunas and some of you in Deki Lee, especially with FDCW, Foundation for Developing Compassion and Wisdom, is there's been periodic meetings on Zoom where we just got together in a coffee klatch to kind of say hi, connection. Our monks and nuns group has done it periodically to kind of say, hey, you're in Arkansas? Oh, cool. What are you doing there? Like, how cool that you're there. Well, I'm in Philadelphia. Like just to see what people are doing. I think you do it with Lama Yeshe Ling. And you can have these greets. So to try to find Ross, like a community like that. And, I personally get excited talking to you, even though it's only like once a month. But when I see you pop on, I'm always like, hey, I'm one of your cheerleaders. So I'm in there. And But again, so trying to find those communities where you can feed in now and then, which I find often the classes is where a lot of people are doing it. And
selective listening is very useful as an answer. And that point about paying too much attention to not the wrong people, but I love the way you talk about softly changing who you're valuing and giving your time to. That's quite lovely.
Yeah, gently, just changing that.
Could you say a little bit more how you would do that gently? I'm sort of thinking I have a few people like that, and
we all have people like that.
I don't want to offend them.
Yep.
But so that's
what I basically I'll just think of this one friend. What I did was just she's very, very needy, and she's made some very poor choices in her life. It appears, even though she's asked me for 30 years for advice, she's never followed the advice. So after a while, like, my time is limited. I'm not any great person. I'm not going to say I'm some great realized, I'm not, but my time is limited. All of our time is limited. We're busy. We have things, and I'm helping centers, I'm teaching, I've got a lot of stuff going on. And I'm also finding that some of the work I'm doing it with are some people that are really interested in changing themselves, changing their minds. And they're, so that's exciting for me. And I feel like that's a better use of my time. So with all the, so what I did is, there were just less times we talked, and she would be judgmental about it. And I call, and I just keep showing up. Like, I show up on text with her, I show up on emails and calling her a couple times a year. And it's now evolved into something where she's used to that. And she's also gotten feedback from other people about she drains people. So it's like she understands that it's not about, and she's judged a lot of other people. So she realizes now it's not really them, but she needs to make some changes. So it's been kind of a slow, natural process. I didn't make any big, declarations of, I just slowly would limit the call or stop the call. Kind of like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. So exactly. Because, it's also your energy, isn't it? That's being drained by somebody like that. And that is, so that is very helpful. Thank you.
It would be more of, like, she would say to me, "Oh, I don't talk to you as much, and you have all these other things you do." And I just said, "Well, I'm working, I'm busy." And she always had part-time work. And I said, "I'm sorry, I'm got full-time work and I'm busy, and I really enjoy what I'm doing. So I'm here right now. Let's talk." Like, I would just right away put it back into the present. I am here right now. What, how are you doing?
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Yes. I know it's not easy.
No, that's good. Thanks.
Maybe it'd be great also if maybe we can continue another time and have another, based on your schedule with Lama Yeshe Ling, but Diki Lee, she's so sweet. But maybe we could continue a similar, because there's so much more you can say about self-compassion. I basically just scratched the surface of a kind of longer course I sometimes do. And yet there's also a whole other course on dealing with difficult emotions. And also, it'd be neat to look at, we did this for another center. It went really, there's an more obscure Lojong text I really like, not the standard 8 verses and things, is a different one that worked really well with going through the passages of death. That is a great way to look at, it's a little deeper level Dharma of looking at how to transform the mind. And that can also be helpful also for some more serious students like that. So there's many directions we can go in. If you have some more time, we want to do again like that.
Great.
So I want to thank everyone for coming. I'm so sorry we're out of time. I really want to thank Dave, Arunas, Lama Yeshe Ling, all the beings involved with that, Deki Lee, who started the center, and all of you part of this. Thank you so much for this wonderful community and all of those who attended. And I'd really like to dedicate whatever positive energy, whatever was helpful for you, please use it. If it's not helpful, just put it to the side. And do try to continue these exercises because they really work. I find that they work. And I'd like to fold all this merit into our own practices that will lead us to rich, consistent practices that will get us enlightened quickly to benefit all beings. And I would like to dedicate also to some beings that need additional healing right now. Geshe Tenley in Boston, as you know, he's healing from a serious accident in June. Sean Tanaka, Ross Lasley, Jody Galt, Joanne Lemson, Venerable Pelyang, Lizzie, Kathleen Ruffat, Jean McGarvey, Trish Flaherty, Norma Harris, Debbie Warner on my personal list, and Barb Hutton. And to all the beings who've had COVID, may they be healed instantly, fully. And for those who've recently passed away, like Dan Miles, who's a dear friend who is connected to our Vajrapani community in Montana, though, who passed away recently. Chris, related to this family I'm living with now, and Colin Powell. May they immediately take a good rebirth to get enlightened to benefit all. And for the great flourishing of Lama Yeshe Ling, all of our centers and projects everywhere, and for great harmony at and among these centers. And I'd like to just share my screen, if I can, to read the long life prayers for His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. I'm just going to bring these up.
While Amy's doing that, I would also like to thank you, Amy, for coming to our virtual place here and sharing your wisdom. And we also pray for you for your successful activities and your long, healthy life.
Thank you so much. Let's see, can I share? Yeah, I can share my screen. Let's see, great. So if everyone can see this, long life prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Let's really, Rinpoche says it's so important to think about His Holiness really intently when you read this. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. For Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three sublime ones, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Thank you, everyone. If you'd like to unmute, we can say goodbye, and please be well. Please be happy, okay?
Thank
Please
you.
be good to yourself.
Bye.
Same to you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Please stay in touch
Well,
if you want.
May everyone be well.
And I'll just put in the
Yes,
chat
really
if
well.
you want to connect more with me. Here's my website if it's helpful,
Wonderful.
and an email if you like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thank
leave
you
this
so
up
much.
for a while
Please
so you
enjoy
can.
the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
You as well.
Thank you.
Yes.